Good morning to you. The Churchillian plot to secure vaccines during the height of the COVID pandemic.
Yes, Boris Johnson has revealed that he planned to invade the Netherlands. Yes, you heard it, in a bid to procure supplies for the UK.
Well, that's just one of many new revelations from the former Prime Minister, serialised in today's newspapers.
Israel has launched a series of strikes on the Lebanese capital of Beirut in a dramatic escalation of tensions between the two sides.
The King leads tributes to the national treasure Dame Maggie Smith following her death yesterday, aged 89, as fans across all generations remember her talent.
As the number of women accusing Mohammed Al Fayed of abuse rises, GB News has spoken exclusively to one of them as she details his behaviour to her.
And his name's in tatters now, isn't it? He's not remembered as the owner of Harrods. He's now remembered as a rapist and a sexual predator. And that's what he deserves, in my eyes.
As Prince Harry heads back to the UK for a visit, we're asking whether it's time to renegotiate Mexit and welcome the couple back.
Good morning. It's a packed weekend of Premier League action with Manchester City boss Pep Guardiola saying he's ready for war against Arsenal counterpart and former protégé Mikel Arteta. And in tennis, Wimbledon gets the go-ahead for a controversial £2 million expansion.
After all the recent very wet weather, finally a drier spell to come this weekend. But how long will it last? I'll have the full details in the forecast coming up soon.
It's just gone 6 o'clock. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is GB News Breakfast.
You ever waking up this morning without Maggie Smith?
I know. It's a new world, isn't it? It's a shame.
Funny, it is a shame.
I mean,
89.
It was a long life and it was very well lived.
Yeah.
And she'll be... What is amazing is that she will be remembered fondly by so many different generations.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? The whole Harry Potter thing has been very important for her, I think, for how she's remembered, because that obviously is the younger generation, at least, that remember her from that. Professor McGonagall, wasn't she?
That's right, yeah. And I mean, all of the newspapers paying tributes to her mostly use that picture of her with the great big witch's hat on.
Yeah.
But, you know, she first sort of came... I first became aware of her for the prime of Miss Jean Brodie, which is still a magnificent movie to watch.
Can't say I've seen it.
Oh, you really
Can't say I've seen it.
It's...
Mind you, I tell you what I haven't seen, which she never saw either, which is Downton Abbey.
She never watched it?
She never watched it.
Oh, my goodness. And again, people all over the world know her for that part. So, yeah, an astonishing life, very well lived. She knew she was loved. She was one of the great dames, as it were. 2 Oscars, and goodness knows how many other awards. She had an incredible career.
Yeah. But
and by all accounts, a lovely lady.
Yeah, well, it's nice that she's being sort of remembered so fondly and celebrated.
Funny, though, isn't it? You think 89's no age. I mean, it is.
Well, yeah.
But it's funny how nowadays we're sort of...
We're getting used to living longer.
Yeah, we are, aren't we? I'll tell you something else, Hayden. The big expansion at Wimbledon, it's not 2 million, is it?
No, about 198 million out, I think.
Right.
200 million.
What are they going to do
£200 million
with 200 million?
Well, it's caused huge problems or huge resistance locally because the controversy is that, you know, it's a major Grand Slam event, of course, we know that, the All England Club, and it is a normal members club for tennis patrons, but it's not used that much, 50 weeks a year, and yet they've found a reason to expand into some woodland, into some green, which is a golf club, the Wimbledon Park Golf Club. And so they're saying they have to compete with the other Grand Slams. I mean, I went to the French Open a few years ago and they unveiled...
Just building more courts, then?
Yeah, another 32 courts.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
So, but there's no evidence there that... I mean, it wouldn't be their decision to expand the tournament anyway. That would be a part of the governing body. But so I'm not sure what they're going to do. But it's been in the offing for a while, but there's huge resistance locally. And
is there?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's too late now. It was decided by the mayor yesterday.
Yeah. Well, if you've got that sort of money to spend, you should spend it on a nice piece of artwork, I think. Because, you know, the Turner Prize... Oh, what a joy the Turner Prize
I thought you were going to talk about the Van Goghs.
Oh, no. No, the Turner Prize. There's an entry in this year's competition and it's hot favourite. And you bump into it. It's a Ford Escort, an old Ford Escort with a massive doily on the top.
And that's an artwork.
And that's a piece of art in the Turner Prize. As Jeremy Clarkson says in The Sun today, it's that time of year when people with hairy armpits come together to talk nonsense about art. Many will say, I could have done that.
Yeah.
True enough, says Jeremy, but you didn't. In the same way you never pickled a shark or submitted your unmade bed. You were too busy working for a living.
Yes, exactly.
What a load of codswallop that is.
Absolutely.
That's the sort of car that used to be given away on Play Your Cards Right, wasn't it? You know?
That's right.
Yeah,
yes.
it's all, you know, you could win it from Bully.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah.
Oh,
But anyway, put
daft.
a massive doily on it and it's worth hundreds of thousands of pounds, apparently. Anyway, there you go. More on that later.
I've been reading and reading and reading for the last hour or so.
Oh, aye.
Yeah,
Here
the
we
Boris
go.
Johnson stuff, it's serialised in the Mail today. I mean, whatever you think of Boris Johnson, it's a book that's almost unputdownable.
Yeah.
Unputdownable.
Is that a thing? Is that a word?
I think it is a word.
Yes, with his latest revelation.
Yeah, he considered invading Holland. That's one of the latest revelations from the extracts of Boris Johnson's memoir in the Daily Mail.
Yes, he claims he asked senior armed forces members to devise a plan to liberate 5 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine.
And that's because he believed that the doses had been kidnapped by the European Union. Do you remember that? Allegedly, they nabbed it all and it was due to come to us. And then it was stored in a warehouse somewhere in the Netherlands.
Oh, let's talk to political commentator Peter Spencer. He's in Cornwall this morning. What do you make of this, Peter?
I think we have to be careful with use of language here. The word revelations. I mean, Boris Johnson is a brilliant, very funny, very clever writer, and not to mention a brilliant and very beguiling orator, hence the 80-strong majority that he won when he fought an election. But I can't quite tell the difference between what I'm reading in the Daily Mail today and what I have in my hand here, which is Boris Johnson's political jokey thriller, 72 Virgins. It was a great read, but of course it was a work of fiction. Now, how do we actually spot the difference between a work of fiction, which sold rather well at the time and was considered to be unputdownable, to use Anne's expression, and what we're reading in the Daily Mail today? I mean, I cut my teeth in Fleet Street when it was in Fleet Street, and there was a particular axiom which resounded round up and down the street, which was never let the facts stand in the way of a good story.
Isn't that a little unfair? I mean, this is his memoir, and it gives us a fascinating insight into what was allegedly happening behind the scenes. For instance, Partygate, he says there, and it's a big headline in the Mail, I saw no cake, I ate no blimmin' cake. If this was a party, it was the feeblest event in the history of human festivity. And the way he tells the story, you sort of get the other side of it, don't you?
Oh, look, I mean, he does tell a brilliant story. There's no question about it. And there's, you know, and the vivid detail about when he had COVID himself. I mean, I find that absolutely and utterly plausible and actually quite fascinating. He tells the story better than I've ever seen anyone else tell it. But one has to remember when it comes to his revelations, that he was sacked by the Times for making up a quote. He was sacked from the front bench of the Conservative Party for telling a fib about an extramarital affair, and ultimately got sacked as Prime Minister for misleading Parliament, for which reason I do say everything that we're reading in the Daily Mail today has to be taken not so much with a pinch of salt as a stonking great barrel of it.
We shall bear that in mind. Peter, thank you very much indeed. Well...
It'll be a bestseller.
Oh, yeah, it'll be huge, yeah. But Boris Johnson's doing a sit-down, a good, chunky interview with Camilla Tominey next Sunday here on GB News. So she will get the truth out of him by hook or by crook.
Yes. It'll be fascinating. That'll be a
will
fascinating
be,
interview
yeah.
as well, yeah.
Now,
I'll be foolish enough to buy the book then. I think I really will. Yeah, I want to read it.
Oh. I don't think I'll actually be doing that.
He talks about when he was obviously hospitalised for COVID. And yes, he does, as Peter said there, he spins a good yarn. He uses wonderful phraseology. He says, I remembered then my Athenian history. Pericles died of the plague. I had earlier reminded my friend Michael Gove, and his spectacles seemed to glitter at the thought, like the penguin in Wallace and Gromit.
I mean, it's all well. I mean,
Great
it does.
stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it makes it a good read. I don't know if I would treat it as fact or, as Peter says, possibly
Entertainment.
possibly fiction. And if we'd invaded the Netherlands, can you imagine? Can you imagine?
Well, it would never have happened, and he was advised against it, and it therefore didn't happen. It would have been terrible, wouldn't it? Apparently, he was thinking of getting commando troops, I don't know, to sort of cross the Channel and then sort of creep up the Dutch canals.
I mean, it's the stuff of fantasy.
But it's
really.
because he always sees himself as Churchill.
Well, yes,
Churchillian.
yes. Right, the Israeli military claims to have killed the commander and deputy of Hezbollah's missile unit in southern Lebanon.
Explosions were heard in the capital last night, roughly 1 hour after Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, spoke at the UN General Assembly in New York.
Well, it's reported that at least 6 people have been killed, 91 wounded following the strike on the city.
Meanwhile, Israel's Prime Minister has vowed to keep fighting Hezbollah in the Lebanon.
The Israeli Defence Force says the strike was precisely aimed at the central headquarters of the Iranian-backed militia group.
Reacting to the attack, the United States Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, says Israel has the right to defend itself against terrorism, but refused then to make further comment until they know more information on the current strikes.
On the events of the last hours, we are still gathering information, making sure that we fully understand what happened, what the intent was, and until we have that information, I can't address in detail our response to it. So we'll continue to work on that in the hours ahead.
Let's talk to the defence editor at the Evening Standard, Robert Fox, who's here. Robert, good to see you this morning. It just seems this very strange situation that we've got the international community saying, well, we're working towards a ceasefire, it could all happen very quickly, whilst Israel just is obviously ignoring that and just ploughing on regardless.
Well, it was both the language and the body language of Benjamin Netanyahu at the United Nations yesterday. He spoke in very fiery and belligerent terms, challenging Iran behind Hezbollah. And I think that that's really what all this is about. But within the hour, he had gone to a secure place, possibly a hotel, and given the order for this massive bombardment, both in the south, but particularly in the Daria suburb of Beirut, which is the heartland, the stronghold of Hezbollah. And it was absolutely clear from Israel's point of view is that they were trying to kill the head, the political and spiritual head of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah. And furthermore, in the evening, and it's been quite a chase around, that they claimed that they'd killed him, but nobody, least of all has Hezbollah in Lebanon, confirmed that. But they're playing on that. Yes, I think there's nothing that Blinken or Sir Keir Starmer or President Biden or Emmanuel Macron could do or say to deter Israel in this. And it does look as if they're set for a ground invasion, at least to some way to clear out a whole area, as they have done time and again, 3-4 times in the past 2 or 3, 4 decades. Ground war in Lebanon now seems to be on the cards.
So what is the next step? I mean, Iran must be sitting, watching, thinking, do we or do we not get involved? Can we afford to get involved?
The point about Netanyahu's rhetoric, I said fiery, and actually that was almost polite because he called the UN itself a swamp of anti-Semitism, and he said Iran, it was sort of rather George W. Bush-like after 9/11, we know where you are, we'll come and get you, we can strike anywhere in Iran, he said. This is concerning because actually this has been a fixation, it's been an obsession with Netanyahu for almost the length of time that he has been in office, and he is by far and away the longest-serving Israeli PM. He's always seen the big enemy as Iran. Iran, despite all the provocations and so on, has not gone for attacking Israel full on, save for one occasion, which we're forgetting about, and it was massive, on the night of April 13th, 14th, when they launched over 250 drones and missiles on Israel. It only struck one target, Iron Dome, the defence arrangement, and allies, including Britain, managed to deter, deflect, interrupt possibly the signals. But this week in London, there has been a conference by the new Space Command. And what came out of that, because Space Command is all about satellites and satellite control, GPS and the like, that you couldn't do this over and over again. If Iran, who has a lot of missiles, challenged the whole cyber defense system of Israel, do this 2 or 3 times on April the 13th, and there could be problems. And we have seen the Houthis using Iranian missiles. They haven't much got through, but they've had 2 or 3 goes, a huge distance, to attack Israel. It's looking very, very ominous. Finally, I know that you're going to say the Western world, the UN, UK, France, it's quite an alliance. We've got no leverage in this.
I was talking to an expert yesterday who said, look, it's been perfectly understandable for Israel to target Iran, actually. I mean, I was saying, look, would that not cause issues with Syria, with Russia and those sort of issues? But he said, no, take it out. Take Iran out and you remove, because they're carrying out a proxy war, so why not? It's perfectly reasonable for Israel to say, we're going to take out that leadership, we're going to take out their munitions, and it removes a region-wide problem.
I don't know who your expert is, and I won't, him or her, I won't introduce them. That's a very simplistic view, and it's one that's been going around for a long, long time. John Bolton almost entertained it at one time, and you may remember that they were saying, in Dick Cheney, you may remember saying...
Bomb Iran.
Bomb Iran. Bomb Iran would mean a retaliation. It would be nationwide. And there's a huge risk it will go nuclear. Really, almost big as anything we're seeing in Ukraine. That whatever they've got, they have got something, that they would be bound to retaliate. They would probably go straight for Dimona, the nuclear, civil and military nuclear centre of the Israelis on the Negev, on the edge of the Negev desert. And that would be, it would be hugely risky. But unfortunately, by nature, Benjamin Netanyahu is a gambler.
And he was very aggressive yesterday.
Oh, it was washing his hands of the UN. That's the big loser.
After he spoke. And of course, we have to remember delegates walked out the minute he walked in as well.
Yeah.
So maybe he's right about the anti-Semitism in the United Nations?
Yes, I mean, I'm doing a Vicky Pollard now. I have to do a yeah but no but.
Yeah.
I understand that, and I understand what he's saying, and I appreciate it, and of that there are elements, as we've seen particularly in this country. But you cannot go, in political, strategic, tactical judgments, any criticism of Israel, ipso facto, Latin, Boris Johnson, is therefore anti-Semitic. It cannot be passed, it cannot be split this way. And the thing that is causing the international lawyers such distress is how, in claiming this legitimacy, they are causing hundreds of thousands of millions, possibly, of displacements. There are a lot of very angry civilians who are collateral damage. Now, the way of war that Israel has been practicing in Gaza, but particularly now in the suburbs of Beirut, is tough. That's what happens. The ordnance that was dropped on Beirut yesterday was enormous. It took down at a go 6 blocks of flats just to get the one pinpoint target. But they do know mostly where much of the leadership is going.
They do. They've been very successful.
And they are very worried about how well dug in Hezbollah is in southern Lebanon. And it's of a different order the last time there was a big war between them in 2006.
OK. Robert, we've got to leave it there, but good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed.
Right then, 19 minutes past 6. Let's have a look at some of the other stories coming into the newsroom this morning.
Well, the King has led tributes for national treasure Dame Maggie Smith after she passed away yesterday at the age of 89. The King praised her warmth and wit. The Prime Minister remarked she was beloved by so many for her great talent. Colleagues and fans from across the world have taken to social media to share their own tributes.
Just Stop Oil have targeted Van Gogh's sunflower paintings again. 3 climate activists targeted the artworks just an hour after 2 other activists were jailed for a very similar protest back in 2022. The National Gallery said the 2 paintings targeted on Friday had been removed for examination and were found to be undamaged.
And barristers representing alleged victims of Mohammed Al Fayed say there are now 60 survivors and they have credible evidence of abuse at Fulham Football Club. One of the alleged victims was talking exclusively to Patrick Christys on GB News last night.
He had this look in his eyes, and I'll never forget it. It was like a monstrous, I'm going to get what I want from you. You know, I don't care how you feel. And I do think because it was in a public place, so to speak, he would have gone further had he could. I think he was worried somebody might come in or I might have started screaming or something like that. So he made his exit pretty quickly. And I think he would have definitely raped me if he'd had half the chance, 100%.
Well, the weather's turning, have you noticed?
Yeah.
It's very dark, the nights are drawing in, and you still have plenty of time, though, to grab an autumn cash boost of an incredible 36 grand. It's the biggest cash prize of the year so far. It could be yours. Here's how to make it so.
On demand. Good luck.
Yeah, best of luck to you on that one. Still to come, flooding has caused travel disruption across the UK. We'll give you all the details in a couple of minutes.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
It's 6:25 now. Flooding from storms has caused disruption to rail services across England. I'm laughing because Nathan's here and his chair's sinking. Anyway, disruption right across England and Wales, even leading to the closure of the M5 in both directions in Gloucestershire.
Yeah, it's almost frightening to drive, isn't it? At
Horrid,
the moment?
really
The
horrid.
bad weather is not due to stop, apparently, because the Met Office have issued a yellow weather warning for strong winds on Sunday, tomorrow, across the southwest.
And this comes as Hurricane Helene has killed at least 43 people in the southeast of the US. Flooding there has caused an awful lot of destruction.
Well, we are joined now by weather journalist Nathan Rao. It is one heck of a picture at the moment, isn't it?
Good morning. It really is. I mean, summer in the UK is just days gone, and we've been thrown full throttle into the autumn storm season. The big story all week, of course, has been the flooding. There were torrential downpours with some parts of the country, particularly Bedfordshire, Woburn, which has seen, I think, 250% of the monthly September rainfall in a matter of hours and left swathes of central and southern England under floodwater. There is a bit of a respite today, but as you said, there are more warnings in force for tomorrow, and this is for wind, and that is down the west coast of the country. That's the West Country and West Wales for gusts of up to 60 miles an hour on the coast and 50 miles per hour inland. So we really are going into a period of very volatile weather.
Yeah, and the problem with any more bad weather here on in is, I guess, it's ground saturation now. So actually, with the flooding, it's not going to take much for flooding to get worse.
No, you're absolutely right. And I was looking the other day at the flooding we had in 2014, the winter floods. If you remember, there were swathes of the country underwater. But that was at the end of the storm season. We are now at the very beginning of the storm season, and already the ground is going to be saturated. The rivers take a bit longer. There's a bit of a delay between the rain and when the rivers start to overflow. But if we get more heavy rain, then we're going to see that lag effect of the rivers. So it's slightly worrying to see this going on this early in the season and thinking about things like, are we going to be going into a winter of flooding and a Christmas flooding situation? Because we're already seeing parts of the country underwater.
And I suppose at this stage there's no way we can tell whether it's going to get worse or continue, or whether maybe we're having it all now and we're going to get a pretty boring autumn.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Now, I always say you can't really tell with any certainty about the weather more than 5 to 10 days in advance. However, that said, we do seem to be entering a pattern, and we've been in the same pattern throughout summer, with the jet stream positioned over the UK in a particularly active Atlantic stormy season brewing up. It's very difficult to look far ahead, but I would say if we are looking at that sort of picture, there does seem to be a pattern of a more Atlantic westerly regime that's wet and windy at this point in the autumn, which may continue. What we need is high pressure to build to bat that off. We're getting a bit of that on today. It's going to be a bit cooler because of that, because we're getting a bit of a northerly. But then we are back into this jet streamy westerly pattern as we go into next week, which is more wet and windy weather.
What about Hurricane Helene in the States? Because as much as we moan about what's happening here, 43 dead.
Yeah, I mean,
there.
she
That's
was
horrific.
huge, an absolute whopper. Now, Hurricane Helene was unusual. She's been described as a historic hurricane, and quite rightly so, because unusually fast wind speeds inland for this type of thing. And she was absolutely colossal, 460 miles across. That's very, very big. Yeah, huge. She was absolutely beautiful to look at from a satellite point of view, but absolutely deadly as she moved along Florida, up the Big Bend of Florida, and now into Georgia. She's died now. She is a post-cyclonic tropical storm. She's going to die very, very quickly. But out in the Atlantic, there are two more storms. There is
because it is hurricane season now,
It is hurricane season, yes, and the American meteorologists are predicting an unusually active hurricane season for various meteorological reasons. And we have Hurricane Isaac, and we have another tropical storm as well in the Atlantic. They look like they're not going to sweep into the United States, but go more northeasterly. But it'd be very interesting coming back to the UK, because of these sort of systems, if they go northeasterly and then get swept up in the jet stream, even though we can't get hurricanes in the UK and we never have had a hurricane, we can sometimes get their remnants, and that can shake up our weather a bit. So, Anne, talking about whether we're going to get more stormy weather going into autumn, the remnants of these hurricanes in the Atlantic, we could have some effect, yes.
Oh, joy.
I love to cheer you up.
You
so there
do,
you go.
don't you? OK, Nathan,
I was
thanks
driving
very much
across
indeed.
an enormous swathe of the Midlands on Thursday. And what was also weird was that you would go through unbelievably pelting rain to the point where you almost felt you just couldn't drive any further because you could not see and the windscreen wipers couldn't keep up. And also the noise was deafening. But then suddenly you'd come out of it to another stretch of motorway where there had been no rain at all, totally dry. It was as though it had never happened. And then you go into it again.
You may have been under a storm. What we had last week, which was actually quite unusual, was big homegrown thunderstorms in a localised space
Yes, very
with an
localised.
intense downpour, and then you move out of it and it's gone.
Weird. And frightening.
It's not a lot of fun. Nathan, we'll see you later on.
See you later
Thank you very
on.
much indeed. Let's get a check on your weather forecast for today with Aidan McGivern.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a chilly start out there, but at least it's fine and bright for many of us, following all the wet weather that some central and southern parts saw at the end of the week. There will be more rain later this weekend, but for the time being, much of England and Wales bathed in crisp sunshine, and it stays that way throughout much of the day. There will be some cloud arriving into Wales and the southwest, the odd shower later, but the thicker cloud will be reserved for Scotland and Northern Ireland, with more frequent showers, especially for the northwest of Scotland, more persistent rain at times. Feeling relatively cool everywhere, 11 to 15 Celsius, but bright blue skies and lighter winds in the south will be perfectly pleasant. The same can't be said for northern and northwest Scotland, where the spells of showery rain will turn a bit more persistent by the end of the day. More scattered showers for southwest Scotland, mostly dry for southeast Scotland. Northern Ireland, a bit of cloud around, but otherwise largely dry. And for England and Wales, after all that wet weather, finally a chance to dry up, with most places seeing a dry end to Saturday. Clear spells then for central and southern parts, as well as the east overnight. Under those clear skies and with light winds, once again temperatures will fall away. However, during the second part of the night, the breeze will pick up and the cloud will start to arrive in the southwest, so milder to start Sunday here. Elsewhere, a bright but chilly start once again through the Midlands, eastern England, eastern Scotland as well, low single figures in places. Now we keep the bright skies in the east and for parts of Scotland throughout Sunday. Some high cloud turning the sunshine hazy, but for Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest, through the morning and early afternoon, it will turn increasingly windy and wet. Risk of 60 mile-per-hour wind gusts in the far southwest and risk of further rain in many places.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Right, we're going to get the sport for you in just a minute. Aidan McGee's going to be here looking at the build-up to all of the Premier League matches this weekend.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Founded in 1990 in Knightsbridge in London, the Beverly Hills Bakery offers some of the finest American baked goods in the United Kingdom. Beverly Hills Bakery has delivered gifts to all the UK Prime Ministers of the last 20 years, with, I think, the exception of Sir Keir Starmer so far, and provided gifts for the royal family and for royal births. As we near the 35th anniversary of the bakery, I'm joined by the owner and head pastry chef, Rosa de Souza, and Manuel de Souza, who is the director of the Beverly Hills Bakery. How marvellous to you both. Welcome to GB News.
Thank you for inviting us.
So, why has this formula worked? Why did London need a Beverly Hills Bakery?
What we do is we're a bakery, but underlying it's actually a gifting experience.
Right.
So this is an alternative to flowers. So in terms of concept, that has maintained its originality despite going on for 35 years. And in fact, what I do is I often ask myself, why is it going strong? To remind myself to focus on those things that we need to focus on.
So instead of sending a bunch of flowers, you send a beautiful box of cakes like that, or confection like that, complete with bunnies and so on.
Exactly. So you have the concept on the one hand, but you also need the quality of product that goes inside. And I think that's where Beverly Hills Bakery has got a great product.
And it's where Rosa comes in, isn't
Yes.
it?
Yes.
So when did you start to bake? Did you start to bake domestically in your home and did it spread from there?
We started from home. My mother's baking, where we didn't have all the stoves and things like that. We baked on the charcoal, you know, like the greens.
Yes.
And we started baking. I learned from my mother the baking.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
The king of breakfast TV is back. That's right. Britain's favourite TV host, Eamonn Holmes, returns to Britain's hottest breakfast programme. Breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. 6:37, if I keep 6:37, and Aidan McGee's with us. Hi there.
Good morning to you both. Good to see you.
What should we talk about first in the sport?
Well, look, I don't like to look back on sport, really, because I think that the agenda is all about moving things forward. But it's a huge game last Sunday, Manchester City against Arsenal at the Etihad. And I think we're seeing a rivalry for the ages now, because Pep Guardiola is the Manchester City stalwart, if you like. He's won, 6 league titles now, 5-6 league titles in the Premier League. Here they are the stellar name, the stellar club in English football right now. And they played Arsenal last week. It was 2-2, and it was an ill-tempered affair. And afterwards, Mikel Arteta, the Arsenal manager, was accused of engaging in what's known in football as the dark arts. It's a horrible cliché, but the dark arts are referring to not necessarily doing the things on the pitch that will get you a result, but maybe just engaging in things that are a little bit underhand, possibly.
Oh, I see.
Now, they were defending a lead. They had 10 men, and Mikel Arteta said, look, you can be as brave as you want. You can go to the beach, on a rainy day you can wear sandals and flip-flops, but the next day you're going to be ill. So basically saying that if you didn't do the right things, on the pitch that we needed to do, we would have suffered the next day.
You turned into Eric Cantona.
That was brilliant, wasn't it? When he went to... what was it he said?
I don't know. When the seagulls are flying off
This is not far off where we are here, because some of these messages are quite cryptic. Famously, Eric Cantona, as Stephen just said, he was referring to the media all turning up to a press conference and expecting him to say something outrageous, and he just came out and said, when the seagulls follow the trawlers, it's because they expect sardines to be thrown into the sea.
Oh.
It was extraordinary. So we're getting into the realms of that here. And so Arteta is annoyed, and he's saying, look, I was there for 4 years. I was Guardiola's assistant. And he said, I have all the information about what went on there. And so Guardiola's come back to him and said, well, what does he mean by that? Is he talking about dark arts, or is he talking about the 115 charges that are hanging over our head? Is he talking about the case that's going through the courts right now in secret that we don't know anything about and could lead to Manchester City being relegated? Nonetheless, they're both in action today. Newcastle host Manchester City at 12:30. Arsenal play Leicester at 3 o'clock. Now, rather menacingly, I don't really like this language used in football, but Pep Guardiola said at the end, if he wants war, that's exactly what he's going to get.
Yeah.
And I wonder if we're going to see going forward the development of this rivalry, the Sorcerer's Apprentice, going to another big club, managing Arsenal, a little bit like Arsene Wenger and Alex Ferguson back in the day when they're always at each other's throats. Maybe this is setting the tone for the future, but we'll have to see how it unfolds.
What else is going on in the matches today? Who else have we got playing?
So we've got, as I said, we've got City and Arsenal in action, Brentford West Ham at 3 o'clock, Chelsea in action, looking very menacing near the top of the league. They've been ridiculed throughout the summer, haven't they, with all their transfer plans and spending big money, but they're in action against Brighton at 3 o'clock. And tomorrow, a huge game, Manchester United against Tottenham at Old Trafford. Manchester United under pressure, as we discussed yesterday. Eric Ten Hag right up against it. And you said yourself, he's not sure he wants to be there. I'm not sure he wants to be there either, judging by some of his comments recently in the media. But he needs a win tomorrow. If he'd lose at home to Tottenham, I would suggest they're under quite severe pressure.
Right, when you come in about an hour's time, can we talk about this amazing extension for Wimbledon?
Yes.
£200 million extension.
Yeah, it went to the Mayor's office yesterday and the verdict's been out. And look, I'm not sure it's going to be worth £200 million, to be perfectly honest with you. I was cutting down a lot of trees.
Well, you've had a quick look at the plans, haven't you? So we'll show them in about an hour's time. OK, thanks very much for the moment. Then, Aidan, do stick with us because Stephanie Tecchi and Kevin Schofield are joining us to go through the papers.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Sir Jacob Rees-Moggs, State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday from 8 p.m.
One of the most eminent constitutional experts, Sir Vernon Bogdanor, has published his latest book, Making the Weather, 6 Politicians That Changed Modern Britain, covering 3 eminent figures on the left, Nye Bevan, Roy Jenkins and Tony Benn, as well as 3 on the right, Enoch Powell, Keith Joseph and Nigel Farage. We began by discussing the latter, the newly elected Member of Parliament for Clacton and leader of the Reform Party. I started by asking him how Nigel Farage has had such a fundamental effect on British politics.
Well, it's not difficult to underline Nigel Farage's effect. He's partly, perhaps largely, responsible for Brexit, which, whether one's in favour of it or not, is the most consequential foreign policy decision we've made since the war. And he's also, I think, largely responsible for destroying 3 Conservative Prime Ministers, David Cameron, Theresa May and more recently Rishi Sunak. How's he done it? I think the answer's quite simple. He's a brilliant communicator. And that, in a way, is the first task of a politician, to be a communicator. The first task of an academic is to teach and write books. The first task of a politician is to be able to communicate. And sad to say, neither Keir Starmer nor Rishi Sunak, whatever their other virtues, are very good communicators. So I think that's the reason for his success.
And Nigel's always been very good at communicating a complex issue through a simple message, and that has resonated with the people that he's trying to influence.
Absolutely. He speaks to people with language they can understand. He doesn't use language they can't understand, like missions or strategic aims or management speak, which has really taken over both of the major parties, I think, frankly.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's 6:44 and time to have a look at the front pages of the papers. The Mail leads with an 8-page Boris Johnson exclusive. That's about a third of his actual book. As the former PM due to release his memoir, Unleashed, October the 10th, I think that's out. It's been revealed that Johnson considered invading Holland over COVID vaccines during the peak of the pandemic.
The Daily Mirror pays tribute to Dame Maggie Smith, branding her a national treasure and true legend. We know now that she passed away at 89 after a glittering 70-year career.
Labour in denial over the fuel row, says The Express, as campaigners called the Chancellor vindictive amid billions of pounds being freed up for investments.
Labour are considering a 13.5% annual cap on tuition fees to £10,500. That's what the Times is saying. And they're also saying that maintenance grants are due to be reintroduced.
Our Sun has Philip Schofield, as the former ITV star claims to have been thrown under the bus when forced to leave this morning.
It's all about him. I think. Joining us to go through what's making the news, political editor of the Huffington Post UK, Kevin Schofield, and showbiz reporter Stephanie Tetchy. Right, so, Kevin, shall we start off with the great Boris Unleashed?
Yes. I mean, a thing to remember is that although he was obviously a Prime Minister politician, he is a journalist at heart. So he knows what makes a good story. And he'll have known that this has been serialised, so he has to come up with lots of good news lines. And this is obviously a great news line. It's all over the front of the Daily Mail. It's in the front of the Telegraph as well. The idea of the UK invading Holland, I mean, it's just absolutely
nonsensical.
bonkers.
It's ridiculous.
It's bonkers. And when you read the story, it was never, ever a goer.
No, but it was a bit scandalous at the time.
Oh, no, absolutely, yeah.
It was a load of AstraZeneca vaccines that the EU had said, oh, hang on a minute, let's not let those go to UK, even though we'd paid for them.
Well, and we'd made the AstraZeneca. It was Oxford AstraZeneca, so it was a UK vaccine, but part of the supply chain meant it had to go through a plant in Holland, so that's why it was there. And the EU were basically hanging on to it. They weren't allowing it to be exported to the UK. So, yeah, there was a genuine reason behind his frustration and anger. So what he's done is he asked it to be worked up, a proposal, were we to try and get this stuff back, which he said had been kidnapped, how would it work? So these military chiefs, top brass, come trooping into Downing Street and basically say, well, it's not really. I mean, it's a bold decision, Minister. You know, that type of yes, Minister.
Do you think it even got that far? Is this just an idea he had?
Well, you know, he says I mean, as you can imagine, it's very well written, and he talks about them coming in and making the presentation to him, but basically saying, "Don't, for heaven's sake, do it." It's absolutely nuts because. Not least because Holland was under lockdown at the time, so it's not as if they could get in and out undetected, in which case then you would be, they say, you would effectively be invading a NATO ally.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know,
his idea was that we would somehow get a commando team.
And they'd got up a canal.
To sort of stealthily cross the channel and then make their way up the Dutch canal.
They would fly in on a commercial flight as if they were, I guess, tourists, and then they would have to go up, well, it being Holland, canals, in order to get there, get in and get out again. But you would never get away with it.
No.
In which case, you can imagine, we would be at war with Holland.
But what I find outstanding about it, and it's the way our brains work and it's the way the press works, is it's a great headline, he's trying to make himself look Churchillian and all the rest of it.
Exactly that.
But it's this, he comes up with an idea and the military says, no, Prime Minister, that's not.
Yeah.
And yet it still portrays him in a good light.
Well,
somehow.
That is Boris Johnson.
It really
all over.
is.
I mean, it is remarkable. He gets away with stuff that no other politician, no other human being would actually get away with. You know, it's absolutely mad.
I think anything Boris Johnson says, you have to take it with a pinch of salt. I just think he's always struck me as a character who has these grand illusions of grandeur. And also, he's, like, Winston Churchill is his idol. So I think, you know, in this kind of situation, he wanted to kind of carry out...
It was his D-Day,
yeah,
wasn't it?
It really was. But can you imagine if he actually did invade Holland? We would probably still be paying the price for it today.
We certainly would.
Stephanie, a world of pain. It's in a lot of the papers this morning.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it claims now that Mohammed Al-Fayed could have abused women, hundreds of women across the world.
What happens with these Me Too cases, it just gathers steam. I think, you know, following that documentary, the same as what happened with Russell Brand, with the Channel 4 documentary, more and more women, or more even, it could be men, you never know, but more people will come out and talk about their experiences of abuse that they've suffered at the hand of a so-called predator like Mohammed Al-Fayed. So far, we're sitting at 200 victims who've come forward and said that they were sexually abused by him at various of his properties. The only question I have to ask now is, what do we do with this information now? The man is dead, and I think survivors and victims of abuse do need to speak up about these things, but how do they really get justice for someone who is dead?
Harrods was the employer. And in many of these cases, they were employees of Harrods, and they should have been better protected against him. But also the doctors who were involved, because there's this horrible, disgusting inclusion of doctors in this, who were keeping him, who were feeding him with information about the girl in the I know they deny it, but that's what I mean. That's why, even though he's dead, there are still questions to be answered.
And suggestions that, you know, because this went on for such a long time and because there was so many victims involved, there must have been other people who knew, people who worked for him,
thing now.
and they will still be alive. What did they know? Were they party to covering up criminal activity, in which case they could be in trouble as well. So I think, you know, you're right, they won't see justice insofar as justice against him personally because he's now dead. However, if it transpires that there were people working for him in and around him who were turning a blind eye, maybe even helping, then they would be helping.
Back then, because I feel now we live in this very culture where people can talk about abuse and being assaulted. Obviously, I was younger in the 80s and 90s, but wasn't that the kind of hush culture that was there? I'm not saying it's right.
Oh, no, but it was certainly around. But it's like one of those things, isn't it? Has this story come as a great surprise to anybody?
Well, no, I was reading, I think maybe the extent of it. I think the extent of it and
the idea he was a dirty
detail.
old man.
We knew that, but I mean, there's a difference, isn't there, between a dirty old man and an old rascal, I think, so Piers Morgan described
But I mean, there's no doubt you talk about
and
culture.
a rapist.
If you were, certainly if you were well known, nobody knew it was just if you were a young, attractive girl or something, he fancied you. But if you were well known and you walked in Harrods, you were spotted within 2 minutes, and a flunky would come down and say, Mr. Al-Fayed, would you like to join me? Would you come up for coffee or whatever? I mean, that happened to me many times. And you always wondered how they knew, and you were always very impressed that some Harrods flunky, as it were, had spotted you and knew who you were, and then immediately the VIP treatment was ladled on. But apparently, according to these women, it was a
It's never happened to me. Not once.
But you were flattered by it, because you know. But clearly, he was on the lookout for. By the sound of it, allegedly, was on the lookout for young women all the time.
I'll tell you what I'd be flattered by, Kevin. That's an additional £16,000 for free clothes.
I mean, it's remarkable, isn't it?
Lord Ali has given more money to the Prime Minister for clothes than we even knew.
Well, yeah, so we knew about, I think it was 20 or thereabouts, thousand for suits and glasses, including an also £5,000 for his wife. But now it emerged that there is more, another 16,000 that we didn't know about, which had previously been had been declared, but only as a gift for the private office of the Leader of the Opposition. So it didn't specify that it was clothes. Now, what is interesting about this, I think, is that £10,000 in October 2023 and another £6,000 in February this year. Now, Labour's defence about the previous amount of money was that, well, it was during the election campaign, we were rushed off our feet, you had absolutely no time to think, so basically we were being given money for clothes and it saved us having to worry about it. But this is before the election campaign. This was so why did he need 10 grand's worth of suits in October, or whatever clothes it was, October 2023? I mean, that was long before the election was called, and also in February 24, but again, before the election was called, he got another £6,000. And so I don't know what the defence for this one is going to be.
I need to be friends with Lord Ali,
well,
because clearly...
all ready to go as soon as I get the right address.
But, I mean, there's no suggestion. Now, it's all been, well, I say it's all been declared, maybe not terribly
well,
but no rules have been broken. But the suggestion would be, what is Lord Ali getting in return? If there's any suggestion that he has been given any kind of preferential treatment from the government because of this, then that would be corrupt.
It's about whether it smells right. I mean, very few rules are broken with the expenses scandal, but it didn't smell right, so it all had to change.
People want to know why these people... I mean, the Prime Minister's a wealthy man. He had a very successful career before he became a politician. He can well afford to... buy his own clothes. So why does he need this money? And that's what people, I think, will make them angry.
Yeah, OK, we've got to leave it there, you two. Thank you very much indeed. Here's the weather with Aidan.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a chilly start out there, but at least it's fine and bright for many of us. following all the wet weather that some central and southern parts saw at the end of the week. There will be more rain later this weekend, but for the time being, much of England and Wales bathed in crisp sunshine, and it stays that way throughout much of the day. There will be some cloud arriving into Wales and the southwest, the odd shower later, but the thicker cloud will be reserved for Scotland and Northern Ireland, with more frequent showers, especially for the northwest of Scotland, more persistent rain at times. Feeling relatively cool everywhere, 11 to 15 Celsius, but bright blue skies and lighter winds in the south will be perfectly pleasant. The same can't be said for northern and northwest Scotland, where the spells of showery rain will turn a bit more persistent by the end of the day. More scattered showers for southwest Scotland, mostly dry for southeast Scotland. Northern Ireland, a bit of cloud around, but otherwise largely dry. And for England and Wales, after all that wet weather, finally a chance to dry up, with most places seeing a dry end to Saturday. Clear spells then for central and southern parts, as well as the east overnight. Under those clear skies and with light winds, once again temperatures will fall away. However, during the second part of the night, the breeze will pick up and the cloud will start to arrive in the southwest, so milder to start Sunday here. Elsewhere, a bright but chilly start once again through the Midlands, eastern England, eastern Scotland as well, low single figures in places. Now we keep the bright skies in the east and for parts of Scotland throughout Sunday. Some high cloud turning the sunshine hazy, but for Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest, through the morning and early afternoon, it will turn increasingly windy and wet. Risk of 60 mile-per-hour wind gusts in the far southwest and risk of further rain in many places.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Best good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
The king of breakfast TV is back. That's right, Britain's favourite TV host, Eamonn Holmes, returns to Britain's hottest breakfast programme. Breakfast every day from 6 a.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. The Churchillian plot to secure vaccines during the height of the COVID pandemic.
It's Boris Johnson who has revealed that he planned to invade the Netherlands. Yes, you heard it right. In a bid to procure those vaccine supplies for the UK.
Well, it's one of many new revelations from the former Prime Minister, serialised in the newspapers today.
And as you just saw briefly there, Israel has now launched a series of strikes on the Lebanese capital of Beirut in a dramatic escalation of tensions between the two sides.
Also today, the King leads tributes to national treasure Dame Maggie Smith following her death yesterday at the age of 89, as fans around the world remember her immense talent.
And the number of women accusing Mohammed Al Fayed of abuse has risen. GB News has spoken exclusively to one of them as she detailed his behaviour to her.
And his name's in tatters now, isn't it? He's not remembered as the owner of Harrods. He's now remembered as a rapist and a sexual predator. And that's what he deserves, in my eyes.
As Prince Harry heads back to the UK for a visit, we're asking whether it's time to renegotiate Mexit and welcome the couple back.
Good morning. Wimbledon have been given the go-ahead for a controversial £200 million expansion to help the All England club maintain its status as the elite Grand Slam of tennis. The plan has been met with furious resistance by local residents, though, and the local MP. More later.
After all the recent very wet weather, finally a drier spell to come this weekend. But how long will it last? I'll have the full details in the forecast coming up soon.
Just gone 7 o'clock. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is GB News Breakfast.
I was trying to get hold of Brian May.
Oh, yes.
To come on the show today, but he's, he had a stroke not long ago, so
Yeah, to talk about what?
He's not feeling up to it. But this RSPCA thing, now I like the RSPCA, but you see it, particularly in places like M&S, RSPCA assured beef and eggs and milk and all that sort of thing. And there's been this controversy that a lot of the farms aren't meeting that standard, and the RSPCA hasn't done anything about it. So Brian's sort of stood down from the RSPCA. Apparently a few other well-known names are following suit. The RSPCA says it's looking into it, but I wanted to get Brian's point of view, but he's not up to coming on.
No.
But isn't that interesting? Because you see these labels on things and you immediately take it for granted. Oh, well, that's all good. Yeah. That's fine. That's well managed.
Farm assured, that kind of stuff.
That sort
Farm
of thing,
assured is probably a completely meaningless term, isn't it?
Probably.
Does organic mean that much? Do we really know where it's coming
I don't exactly.
Oh, I won't buy organic stuff.
Why not?
Because it costs so much more money. And I'm just like, no, why am I going to pay like an extra 50p for a leek?
It's marketing, isn't it?
I think a lot of it is.
You've got a garden, you should grow your own now.
Should grow. We used to when we were kids. We grew all our own veg
Did you
and
really?
things. Yeah.
What sort of stuff?
Well, everything. Turnips, potatoes,
I think we should
leeks,
all be doing
carrots,
that.
peas, broad beans. Did the lot.
Take out the water feature or whatever you put in the 80s and 90s.
Babbling brook.
That's right, the babbling brook and all the rest of it, and the decking, all that sort of decking that became terribly trendy. Yeah, take that out and plant your own.
We're all going to be like the good life.
Yes. Well, maybe that's the way forward for a while.
We had apples and gooseberries, I remember. Not a lot else. It wasn't enough to sustain us throughout the
No,
winter.
no, exactly. We had enormous blackberry bushes, which was wonderful. You could make jam and have blackberry, but again, not enough to sustain you through the winter.
We had loads of stuff and then used to blanch it and freeze it.
Yeah, that's right. We should go back to doing that. We've all become. If you're lucky enough to have a garden, it's ornamental, isn't it, instead of useful now?
Yes,
You're going sinking down again.
Got that sinking feeling. Honestly, these blooming chairs.
Yeah, but we're told we might be getting new ones, and we certainly need to. Or why don't they just make them solid instead of this silly...
Up and downy thing.
Yeah.
I know.
The up and downy thing, it's not working.
I need my gas redoing, as it were.
They all need their gas redoing.
Anyway, should we crack on?
Yes, let's crack on with the amazing revelations, if they are revelations, the amazing words, anyway, in Boris Johnson's new memoir, which is being serialised at the moment in the Daily Mail, but it's also making the front page of the Telegraph because it's so astonishing. Because he says, I considered invading Holland. That's in his new memoir. As I said, there you are, front page of the Daily Mail.
Yeah, he says that he asked senior armed forces members to devise a plan to liberate 5 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine.
And that's because he believed at the time that the doses had been kidnapped by the European Union and stored in a warehouse.
Let's talk to political commentator Piers Pottinger. Morning, Piers.
Morning.
What do you make of this?
Well, I never thought of Boris Johnson as Tom Cruise, but this is clearly Mission Impossible. And
very good.
Very nice.
And it also sounds a bit like an episode of Van der Valk, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The British are coming to steal our vaccines. I mean, it's absolutely extraordinary. And if anyone ever doubted about Boris's sanity, then here's your answer. I mean, it was a lunatic idea. And one wonders how well he was. Remember, he was very ill during COVID. Some people doubted how ill he was. Well, I think this is the answer. He was very ill, because this must have affected his brain, because it really is insane. And, of course, the repercussions, had he done this, would have been colossal. And according to the serialisation, he had meetings with the heads of the army to talk about it, and they took it seriously. That baffles me even more, that anyone would give this more than 2 seconds thought.
Well, if you believe it.
I do believe it, because I think it's... And also, I am surprised that if this is the best you can get out of the book in a serialisation, it doesn't mean the rest of the book's going to be of much interest.
But you have to remember, don't you, that it was outrageous at the time. We were aware that there was an enormous... We knew we were running out of vaccine. We simply didn't have enough. And we also knew that we owned, or had already paid for, an enormous shipment of the AstraZeneca vaccine, which... what's her name in charge of the EU?
Oh, von der Leyen.
Yeah. She had actually said, no, we're not going to release them to you.
And also...
We are keeping them here, which was outrageous.
It was outrageous. And also Macron said, if you remember, that AstraZeneca vaccine wasn't effective for people over 65, which turned out to be completely untrue. But there was a lot of bad feeling in the EU, and there was also a bit of jealousy that we were ahead of the game when it came to vaccine. And this shows you why, in my opinion anyway, it's a good example of how the EU was working against Britain, and often does. But that said, the idea of doing something as preposterous as this is really shocking, and one of the most shocking things. Not the most shocking political news of the morning. I mean, that must be Lord Ali again, who, it has emerged in 2013, had secret meetings with Assad of Syria, and as a result of those, persuaded Labour to vote against the proposed military action in 2013, which is quite shocking. It shows how long and how influential Ali actually is politically, and the murky control he has within the Labour Party. I think that's much more sinister. I think the Boris Johnson story today about the Netherlands is just, quite frankly, it doesn't... Anything about Boris should not surprise you. It'll sell a book. Yeah, and it's sort of almost P.G. Woodhouse-like. And the language he uses, of course, about it being nuts or bonkers, and I mean, it's sort of comedy, really. But as you say, at the time it was very serious, and he obviously meant it. I mean, that's what's worrying to me, is that he did mean it. And I think, really, the repercussions, had that happened, would have been far-reaching and long-lasting and devastating for the long-term security of this country.
OK, Piers, we've got to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. Well, Boris Johnson is having a full, long interview with Camilla Tominey next Sunday here on GB News. So that will be, if nothing else, extremely entertaining.
Very, very much so, I think. Right, it's 9 minutes past 7 already. Now, barristers representing alleged victims of Mohammed Al Fayed say there are now 60 survivors and they have credible evidence of abuse at Fulham Football Club.
Well, the former Harrods boss and Fulham FC owner is accused of many sexual assaults after an investigation was published last week. One of the alleged victims has spoken exclusively to GB News on Patrick Christie's show last night.
I just thought, was it what I was wearing? Why did he do that to me? Was it because I looked back at him when he kept staring at me in the restaurant? I was making all these excuses, almost sort of blaming myself for the incident, for the assault. He had this look in his eyes, and I'll never forget it. It was like a monstrous, I'm going to get what I want from you. I don't care how you feel. And I do think, because it was in a public place, so to speak, he would have gone further had he could. I think he was worried somebody might come in, or I might have started screaming or something like that. So he made his exit pretty quickly. And I think he would have definitely raped me if he'd had half the chance, 100%.
Absolutely understand her point of view. You can catch more interviews like that, of course, along with big debates and even bigger guests on Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m.
Yeah, the one thing about that whole story, and so thankfully we can sort of be a little bit more lax with our words because you cannot libel the dead, but is that, how is this a surprise to anyone? People must have suspected. It's horrific. And I'd never met the man, don't know the man, but it doesn't come as a massive surprise that he was a bit predatory. Because often when people are very rich and have, command a lot of power, they do seem to take advantage.
It's the detail, I think, that is so extraordinary. I mean, I knew the man, never suspected. Just thought he was the sort of man who was so used to being powerful that he forced his hospitality on you and made you feel a little bit uncomfortable, that he was saying, you must do this, have this, come up for tea, all the rest. And you thought, I'd rather not, but you sort of felt as though you were being bludgeoned into it a bit. It doesn't surprise me to learn that there is more, but the detail of it is quite awful.
It is horrific. But we'll get more details coming out, of course, and those people who are coming forward and having their say, but whether there'll be any justice for them or not, it's very hard to say.
At least they're being heard, I think, now.
Yes, which is very, very important.
As that young lady said on Patrick Christie's last night, she said, it's right now that now he will be remembered in a very different way. And she feels at least that is something.
Yeah. Very strange character, though. He's so obsessed with the royal family. Anyway, right. Let's have a look at the international news for you, because the Israeli military claims to have killed the commander and deputy of Hezbollah's missile unit in southern Lebanon.
Explosions were heard in the capital last night, roughly 1 hour after Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke at the UN General Assembly in New York.
It's reported at least 6 people have been killed, 91 wounded following the strike on the city.
Meanwhile, Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to keep fighting Hezbollah in the Lebanon.
The Israeli Defence Force says the strike was precisely aimed at the central headquarters of Hezbollah.
Joining us now, defence editor at the Evening Standard, Robert Fox. Hello again. I heard one of the, in fact, it was the Daily Telegraph correspondent in Israel who said that everybody keeps calling for ceasefire when it's Israel who fights back, but nobody calls for a ceasefire when it's Hezbollah bombing or attempting to take out Israel. Is it fair the way this is being reported?
Well, it's very difficult to be reported. I don't like... I mean, it's so difficult to judge this, but there are different questions of access. Of course, Lebanon, South Lebanon, Beirut is much more accessible than Gaza is, and where Israeli military censorship has been very strict, of course, and they've taken in embedded correspondents on carefully managed trips. I think the Daily Telegraph correspondent is entitled to his or her opinion. I think that it's very difficult to keep track of what's going on because there are different stories being told. Incidentally, there has been a further round of bombardment of not only of southern Lebanon but of Beirut this morning, and the reports from the capital that hospitals are now being emptied in those very densely inhabited, populated southern suburbs. And what are we waiting for? It's very interesting, the Israeli interpretation. The Israeli press is very lively and obviously it has good access and in some ways is more critical than things like, I'm afraid, whether it's The Guardian or the Daily Mail or whatever. And I think it's invidious to go into that. The Times of Israel, founded by Anthony Horowitz, British Israeli, who was the first independent correspondent, is saying, actually, the Israelis are trying to do everything so they don't have to put ground troops into Lebanon, realizing that that's the consequences. And the Israel Air Force chief has said, yes, our main aim is now to stop restocking important weapons going from Iran into Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. But the game of words that is so interesting is, and this was Admiral Regev, the chief spokesman, was saying, we are still not sure, and we're trying to check out whether we have killed the head of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, last night. Another thing, just to update, is that Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader in Iran, is, as we speak, having an emergency meeting with his political and military chiefs.
All of this begs the question for those of us who aren't experts in this area, because it's so difficult to get your head around all the intricacies of all of this. Is even if Israel were successful and you sort of take the head off the snake and what have you, it's similar to the Hamas argument, isn't it? It's saying, well, you don't stop the ideology. You're not going to... You can damage Hezbollah to a point where you think, well, they could not recover, except they're being supported by Iran, and the ideology will continue, the arms will continue coming through eventually. So what difference will it actually make?
This is where you do come to a fundamental difference, and Hezbollah is embedded Shia Arab nationalism in Lebanon. We talk about being a proxy for Iran. No, it is a movement and part of the government in a dysfunctional governmental area in Lebanon. And it has a lot of support. Now, Fawaz Gerges, formerly of the LSE, who is Lebanese Christian, has just written a book about this and then was explaining that actually Hezbollah, would you believe it, has radical Sunni support and radical Christian support in Lebanon. So I'm making your point for you, Stephen. It's going to exist anyway. This is a very profound and long debate whether targeted assassination really works. And this is an argument, both practically and morally, ethically, that has been going on since the Middle Ages. And I mean that truly. St. Thomas Aquinas and his followers wrote about it. The Jesuits argued about it in the Counter-Reformation when Europe was set ablaze with its bloodiest war per capita in the 30 Years' War. Is it right? Is it justifiable? And what does it serve? To cut off the head of the snake. By the way, it was a very powerful argument in World War II, as we know, because they killed the Gauleiter of Czechoslovakia, because he turned out to be the architect of the final solution. And what did it lead to? As an SAS raid, could you believe it? It led to the most horrendous reprisals. And it gets you nowhere. I'm not here to make the judgment of Solomon, but you're absolutely on it. Because it's so interesting. The Israelis are arguing, yes, they think they may have killed Hassan Nasrallah. They've killed 2 commanders, tactical commanders in the south. They even think that they have killed, they're claiming that they might have killed, but cannot just fully verify, Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas. But as you rightly say, as they said, it'll be a rump terrorist organisation. But it's going to be a rump terrorist organisation that's going to go on and on. Yeah. I have to say of Hezbollah, it's not going to be the same because it is a mass movement. And somehow they're going to have to deal with it. And there's got to be some accommodation because the fighting just can't go on for generations. Neither side has the resources for it.
OK, Robert, we've got to leave it there. Really good to see you. Thank you.
Very bleak outlook, isn't it? Shall we have a look at some of the other stories coming into the newsroom this morning?
The King has led tributes for national treasure Dame Maggie Smith. She passed away yesterday at the age of 89. He praised her warmth and wit. The Prime Minister said she was beloved by so many for her great talent. Her colleagues and fans from across the world have taken to social media to share their own tributes.
At least 43 people have been killed as Hurricane Helene makes its way across southeastern United States, leaving millions without power. Emergency crews are now racing to rescue people trapped in flooded homes.
And Just Stop Oil have targeted Van Gogh's sunflower paintings again. 3 activists splashed the artworks with paint just an hour after 2 others were jailed for a similar protest in 2022. The National Gallery said the 2 paintings targeted on Friday had been removed for examination and were found to be undamaged.
Well, the weather is all important at the moment, isn't it? Shall we find out how it's going to affect you? Here's Aidan McGivern.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a chilly start out there, but at least it's fine and bright for many of us following all the wet weather that some central and southern parts saw at the end of the week. There will be more rain later this weekend, but for the time being, much of England and Wales bathed in crisp sunshine, and it stays that way throughout much of the day. There will be some cloud arriving into Wales and the southwest, the odd shower later, but the thicker cloud will be reserved for Scotland and Northern Ireland, with more frequent showers, especially for the northwest of Scotland, more persistent rain at times. Feeling relatively cool everywhere, 11 to 15 Celsius, but bright blue skies and lighter winds in the south will be perfectly pleasant. The same can't be said for northern and northwest Scotland, where the spells of showery rain will turn a bit more persistent by the end of the day. More scattered showers for southwest Scotland, mostly dry for southeast Scotland. Northern Ireland, a bit of cloud around, but otherwise largely dry. And for England and Wales, after all that wet weather, finally a chance to dry up, with most places seeing a dry end to Saturday. Clear spells then for central and southern parts, as well as the east overnight. Under those clear skies and with light winds, once again temperatures will fall away. However, during the second part of the night, the breeze will pick up and the cloud will start to arrive in the southwest, so milder to start Sunday here. Elsewhere, a bright but chilly start once again through the Midlands, eastern England, eastern Scotland as well, low single figures in places. Now we keep the bright skies in the east and for parts of Scotland throughout Sunday. Some high cloud turning the sunshine hazy, but for Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest, through the morning and early afternoon, it will turn increasingly windy and wet. Risk of 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts in the far southwest and risk of further rain in many places.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Right, you could be in for a whole load of cash.
Oh, I heard you use a word yesterday. Lolly.
Lolly, yeah.
I haven't heard that word in years.
Lovely lolly.
Yeah, you said something about lovely lolly yesterday. I thought, wow, that's
You see?
Yeah,
I'm
lovely
older.
old word.
I'm older than I look. Anyway, it's £36,000 in tax-free lolly that could be yours. If you want to be in with a chance to win it, here are the details.
Watching on demand. Good luck.
Good luck indeed, so you can earn that lovely lolly. Now, still to come, with Prince Harry set to return to the UK tomorrow for one of his charity things. We're wondering whether it's time that he and Meghan will be welcomed back into the royal family. Would she want to come? Anyway, it's 7:24. Do stay with us.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
I'm now joined by a truly inspirational man. He's an endurance runner, Ben Smith. 401 marathons in just 401 days for mental health and well-being. He was spurned on after being bullied as a child, was able to raise a whopping £250,000. I'm pleased to say that he joins me now. Right, so this was a while ago, wasn't it?
Yes.
How long ago was it?
Well, we're coming up to, I think next year, roughly about 10 years since we started it. In 2026 will be 10 years since we finished.
So when did you run the marathons?
So it was between 2015 and 2016, over the course of 401 days, all around the UK.
What kind of madness was that?
Oh, it was an adventure, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, on day one when we started in Bristol, never ever thought that the project would ever become what it became. But over the course of the 401 days, we ran with 13,500 people within 8 miles of everywhere on the British mainland, from Land's End to John O'Groats. So,
and that was the journey from Land's End to John O'Groats?
Yeah. We covered so many different communities around the UK because I suppose the reason why I was doing it was to raise so much money for 2 anti-bullying charities that we wanted to include people in that. And yeah, I got to run in some amazing places.
I bet you did. What would you say is a beautiful place? I mean, the whole country, I love this country, but there are some outstanding, beautiful areas around. What would you say?
Oh, definitely.
Where's the best place that you run?
Well, I think I've got a few, but I think I would say probably the Highlands of Scotland.
I knew you were going to say somewhere like
that. Yeah, just the kind of vastness of it, the dramaticness of it. I remember running up and down one of the paths in the Highlands near Glencoe and coming face to face with a wild stag. So it was quite, quite scary.
What did it do?
Oh, it did nothing. It did absolutely nothing. It was quite used to people because of the path.
What are you doing here? This is my house.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and he did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, now, this week it was revealed that former Prime Minister Boris Johnson had what they called a manly pep talk with Prince Harry in an attempt to persuade the Duke to stay in the UK.
Now, look here.
Well, if you remember, actually, John Major got involved in the Prince and Princess of Wales's divorce.
Did? I'd forgotten about that.
Years and years ago.
Wow, that
So
was...
maybe this is something the royal family do if it's a really difficult situation.
Well, he wasn't the man
Call in
to
the
talk
Prime
about...
Minister.
He wasn't the man to tell Charles about having an affair, was he?
No, he really wasn't.
So it turned out. Anyway, Mr Johnson was asked by Downing Street and Buckingham Palace officials to step in, as we were saying.
Now, as Harry is due to visit the UK tomorrow, should we consider, as if it's our thought at all, to welcome back the Sussexes with open arms?
Don't really know how we conflate the two issues. Anyway, let's talk to former Royal Gardener Jack Stooks and Royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams. Morning to you both. Richard, what do you think? Do we need to forgive and forget?
Well, firstly, I mean, they don't want to come back, and at the moment, absolutely not. I mean, you're dealing with an institution that's serious if they actually came back. I mean, in some hypothetical form, you'd have a circus. Every single royal event that involved the Sussexes, you'd have the focus on them and so forth. It would, in reality, be completely impractical if you consider that in the past 4 years they've conducted a guerrilla war against the royal family. They've done enormous damage to it, and indeed, if you look at the 18 to 24-year-old group, which is disenchanted with the institution, but where they do have support, it's the only, if you look at the polls, this is the only place the Sussexes actually have support. This is one of the results of the Oprah interview, the 6-hour Harry and Meghan Netflix documentary where they had talking heads rubbishing the Commonwealth, Spare and those ill-advised interviews around it, and also let's ask a question too. When did the Sussexes last say something that was favourable about the royal family? I can't think. Indeed, in theory, they want an apology for the way that Harry believes Meghan was badly treated when they were senior working royals. So, I mean, the answer's absolutely no. You could say it 3 times and imitate Margaret Thatcher if you like, but, I mean, there's no way they were going to come back. They don't want to. They're happy in California, supposedly. And most certainly, they're the issue of trust. Who would trust them? No.
OK, Jack, I know that over the many years you worked for Prince Charles, you got to know both of the boys very well. And you're a bit fed up with the negative way that certainly we now in the media in Britain talk about Harry.
Yes, I think this is the problem. I mean, you've heard Richard say, no, don't have them back. But what have they actually done that's been so awful that Britain can't let them come and go as they please? They've not actually done anything illegal. They've not done any sort of, they haven't bombed anybody. They've done nothing wrong. all they've done is be themselves. So Harry chose to marry Meghan. You know, everybody has an opinion, and completely everybody's entitled to that opinion, like them or loathe them. That's the opinion that people have. But they haven't been given a ban on not coming back to England. So if they want to come back to England, let them come back to England. If they don't want to come back to England, again, they don't need to. It is their lives, and that's what Harry was banging on about at the time. He just wanted to have his life. You know, the royal family haven't said anything supposedly positive about about Harry. Likewise, why would they need to say anything positive the other way around? They're living their lives. They talk privately, presumably, to each other. And, you know, if Harry is coming back and wants to see his family, why shouldn't he be allowed to?
No, they don't. I'm afraid the rift is so bad that there's a lot of speculation. We don't know whether they talk privately to each other. How would we? But there most certainly is not a conversation at the moment publicly between William and Harry. This was obvious at Lord Fellowes' memorial service. They were both at the back of the church, apparently, and reportedly didn't say a word to each other.
Reportedly, you don't know what they're doing or saying.
Well, I am saying that we're talking about, this is a debate about renegotiating Brexit, and if that was the case, in fact, what was arranged at the Sandringham Agreement would have to be looked at again, and that would mean that Sussexes would have their cake and eat it, so to speak, because they could do the commercial along with royal activities, and to have them at royal events, as I say. I mean, you would have an undignified circus, you would have a weird situation. And this is something that Meghan would want. She was desperately unhappy, unfortunately, when they were doing royal events and they were here. So Harry can come and go as he wants, fair enough. His relationship with the rest of the royal family, I mean, there's a deep rift, we know. We also know, and we all are aware, that King Charles and, of course, the Princess of Wales are fighting cancer. It's a dreadfully difficult time for the royal family. So let us hope that it could be some form of reconciliation. But we're not talking about renegotiating Brexit. I mean, that's just bizarre.
No, we're talking about allowing them to come and go as they please, which is
suggesting that they can come and go as they please. It's a question, however, of whether or not they would want to do royal duties, and they wanted it half in, half out. You can't renegotiate that because that isn't being royal. The royal family is a serious institution. It's pivotal to our unwritten constitution. It's a symbol of national unity. This would be ridiculous.
Final word, Jack?
Yeah, sorry.
Final word from you, Jack.
Well, I think, well, I mean, this is ridiculous. Rich is banging on about that they shouldn't be allowed back in. Harry can, but Meghan can't. I mean, who are we to decide whether Harry can bring his wife to and from England? It's none of his business or ours.
Well, yes, but it's not, as Richard said, it's not whether they can come and visit the country, is it? It's whether they come back and have any royal role here.
If the king, like we know full well, he is unwell. We know that the Princess of Wales is unwell. Normally, you do actually want your family and friends around you to help and support. Well, if Harry's, I don't know, but Harry might be coming back to say, look, I'm here if you need me. I'm here to support if you need me. Things have happened in the past. Things will happen in the future. We can't decide what the rights and wrongs of what they're going to do. Obviously, we're all on our own path. But allowing them to come back in, and if he wants to take on the role, and if the king says, please, actually, can you do this for me? Who are we to say that Harry shouldn't?
That won't happen, but essentially at the basis of this, there's trust. And the royal family, with reason, don't trust the Sussexes. I'm afraid that that is a situation, and very, very definitely there is no renegotiation of Brexit on offer.
OK, you two. We've got to leave it there. Thanks very much indeed, Jack Suits and Richard Fitzwilliams.
Yeah. And there's no doubt, actually, the overwhelming opinion of you guys watching at the moment, saying that they wouldn't trust a brother who did that to them. That's their opinion of Harry. But anyway, we really don't know whether they want to come back at all. And you get the feeling that I don't think she'd want to come back.
No,
anyway.
I don't think
she's not
she'll.
interested.
I don't
Whereas
think
he still has family here.
I don't think she'd ever set back foot in this country,
I don't
to be
think
honest.
so either.
Right, still to come, we've got the sport. Wimbledon given the go-ahead for a controversial expansion. We'll get more details from Aidan McGee in a moment.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
Shakespeare play is axed after director refused to remove pro-transgender and pro-Palestine references in new take on A Midsummer Night's Dream. I went to see A Midsummer Night's Dream at Kew Gardens this summer and it was brilliant, and they didn't touch it. They just left it as it is. And really, when you look at the plot of A Midsummer Night's Dream, it's essentially about sexual assault by today's standards. There's a lot of...
You mean bottom and all that?
Yeah, giving people potions so they'll do things they wouldn't have done otherwise. And I thought,
I was enamoured of an ass.
Yeah, exactly. And but they didn't alter the script, and it was brilliant, and I thought it was really, really good. On the other hand, this director, Steph O'Driscoll, known for her work in London's Royal Court Theatre, had a bit of an issue because she's put some very political stuff into her version. And of course, I would argue for her in that she can do whatever she likes. I'm all for creative freedom, but there comes a point where you're like, well, is it still Shakespeare then?
Yeah.
His version definitely wasn't pro-Palestine.
Yeah, I don't remember the pro-Palestine, pro-trans bit.
But the truth is these two things do not go together, trans right and free Palestine. I think the Gazan people are not so gung-ho trans rights stuff.
How dare you, Luke?
So,
Queers for Palestine is a legitimate movement.
But even if it isn't, she's allowed to make something that's incoherent to you. Sometimes you make things that are incoherent to other people.
And you know what? The people out there hear what I say.
Because so the management, the one thing I sympathise with is that they tried to shut it down after the preview. They said you've had all these months, and then they saw one preview and they sort of, whoever was running it went, well, change all that. And they were like, well, no, it's too late. You could have changed it at any point. But then the director walked out and the whole thing just fell apart, right?
Well, you don't know what the real thing is. It might be that this is how they get attention for the play. Now we're paying attention to this, and we're all going to go to this theatre in Manchester.
We're totally going to watch it all together.
So cynical.
GB News, the People's Channel.
The king of breakfast TV is back. That's right. Britain's favourite TV host, Eamon Holmes, returns to Britain's hottest breakfast programme. Breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop star to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Time for sport at 7:39. Here's Aidan. Hi there.
Good morning.
Now we're going to talk about Wimbledon this time, yeah?
We are indeed. 39 being the key number.
39.
Do you know why?
No.
39 new courts.
Absolutely.
39 new courts.
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons they decided to build it, they're saying they need to compete with the other Grand Slams. Of the 4 Grand Slams, Wimbledon is still the elite one by about that much. And we've seen the French Open expand as well in the last few years over at Roland Garros to the southwest of Paris. Very similar location.
So the map we're looking at now, can you explain?
So that's what you can see there is the main green kind of footprint is where the All England Club is right now.
What, the big bit?
Yes, that's right, on the green. And to the left-hand side is Wimbledon Park Golf Club, where there are going to be 300 trees felled. Now, it's been going on for some years. The locals, I mean, I know the area very well. There's been lots of resistance nearby, mainly at the loss of wildlife and the damage it will do to vegetation, and so losing, obviously, pieces of land. And the locals feel generally that they've got enough space as it is. In fact, you could even argue that the whole complex right now, Anne, is not used enough right now. I mean, they use it two weeks a year for the tournament. Even if they get the go-ahead, which they've got now, to expand here, it's going to create a 3-week tournament instead of a 2-week tournament because they're going to do the practice there. So the practice is currently done at Roehampton, about 2 or 3 miles away, and they're going to have the practice there. And now at Wimbledon, they can do it all in one-stop shop. So it means that the fans, locals, can get in there and watch players practice. It just seems
the locals
to me,
want to.
The locals would want to, yeah. But I mean, they're saying that. But
locals will get more for their houses when they rent them out during the Wimbledon period, won't they?
Maybe because. Yeah, that's one way of
what
looking
they
at it.
do, isn't it? They rent out their driveways, don't
Well, there are a lot of people come to town, actually, because it's not just the players, it's the coaches and all the... I mean, some of the top players travel with armies of a cast of thousands these days. But nonetheless, I mean, you know, it's going to create an 8,000-seat show court with another 38 courts around it. To some, it looks exciting. And you can watch practice there, and the qualifying can take place as well there. But
no good if you want to play golf.
No, exactly. Well, I mean, there are other courses in the area. I suppose that's what the feasibility study would have. That's the argument it would have made. But there were protests yesterday at City Hall when the Deputy Mayor Jules Pipe and Sadiq Khan made the announcement that they were going to get the go-ahead for their plans. Yeah, £200 million, and calls of shame on you. And Sadiq Khan came back and said they're going to be very significant benefits. It even outweighs the damage it would do to the environment. But as I say, lots of resistance locally, and you're going to see a rise in the number of commercial outlets there as well, which, OK, you could say it might create a buzz in the area, but it isn't really that kind of area. It's a very residential area. It's not like a football ground.
But it is important, isn't it, to keep up the status of Wimbledon as the world #1 tournament.
Yes, I agree, and it has the status of being the only grass tournament. It's hugely prestigious. I mean, just a little bit ahead, I would say, of the Australian, the French, and the US. I don't know about
you talk to any of the champions, and Wimbledon is what they want to win.
It is, but I think the prize money is actually higher elsewhere.
Yeah, but that's not Wimbledon is the classy #1.
Yes,
in the world,
I would agree.
Sorry, but it is. I'm terribly sorry. But Wimbledon, although I'm not a local and I can see that it might really upset the locals, it just means more traffic.
It's a huge...
Are they going to build a car park in there?
Yeah, they are building a car park, actually. They're going to do that.
They need to do that.
They do. I mean, I was there a few weeks ago, and they're actually... It's amazing how they use the car park out of season to just transfer all the stuff out of the building in there, just to dismantle it, all the temporary stands, all that kind of stuff. And in theory, they'll need less of that. But as I say, it's the footprint of the ground is huge. It's something like 800 hectares.
Yeah, but it needs to be if it's the world #1.
I guess so. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I do apologise to locals.
Fleur Anderson.
Get your messages of complaint in. No, now, gbnews.com/you'll say. We're out of time, Aidan.
OK.
But we'll see you a little bit later on. We've got the papers heading away in a couple of minutes.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Well, the first thing on in my mind when I heard about this is what has this country come to when we're talking about getting kids as young as 6 years old to be jabbed weekly or however often it is because they are too fat. Where are the parents in all of this? There's three things actually here that are important. Number one is we do not know the long-term consequences of these jabs. So if I had a child and I was going to let them have the jab, I would be feeling like I'm treating them like a lab rat, to be quite honest with you, because we don't know the long-term consequences. Secondly, the manufacturers are clear that some of the potential side effects can be very serious. We're talking about potentially pancreatitis, let's get my word out, and also it lists as a potential side effect thyroid cancer. Arguably, it's called the gamble jab, to be honest with you, because of these potential side effects at the moment. And then thirdly, I come back to the parents. Where are the parents in all of this? Because they are the role models. So it really is about parenting, and it's about parenting from being a role model yourself in terms of being slim and healthy and not expecting a jab to take your place and other people to take your place. If you have children, they are your responsibility. Think before you breed. The other thing you need to remember with this is when you stop taking that jab, it is highly likely that you're going to put all the weight back on. Now, the thought of a child of 6 years of age, starting with that jab, conditioning them mentally to live with that jab, as far as I'm concerned, is absolutely not on.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
7:47. Let's see what's making the papers this morning with political editor of HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield, and our favourite showbiz reporter, Stephanie Tetchy. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
Let's talk about the true legend, Steph, in Dame Maggie Smith.
The Mirror put it nicely: wise, witty, waspish and wonderful.
Yeah.
And I think that is the perfect way to describe Dame Maggie Smith. I think, you know, people always say national treasure, but when you look at Dame Maggie Smith, so many different parts of people can relate to her, whether you're a Harry Potter fan, whether you're a Sister Act fan, like, it's just incredible the amount of Sister Act, The Secret Garden, like 72 years, 63 films, 78 stage performances. And I think that is someone where you feel like when they die, they take their talent with them, and it will be hard to fill her shoes, and I don't think anybody would want to.
Stephen said at 6 o'clock this morning, didn't you, we now live in a world where there is no Maggie Smith.
No.
And that's sort of...
Yes.
Quite something.
And it shows the fast pace of the acting industry now. You don't really get stars like you used to. Like, I always enjoying interviewing these kind of celebrities because they've got the longevity and they've just got this immense talent. At 88, she was still performing. Last year, she became a trendsetter when Loewe, the Spanish fashion label, used her as the face of their campaign. So she definitely was...
It's funny you used that word celebrity, because I was going to say she is a star but not a celebrity.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. Yeah.
She was just known for her work.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right, I mean, it cuts across the generations. Is that our youngest is 8 and she loves Harry Potter. So I had to tell her last night that Professor McGonagall had died, and she was really upset, actually. And she was really...
Why did you tell her, you Ron Devil?
Well, it was her big sister's told her. I think her big sister quite enjoyed telling her, you know, because she knew it would annoy her.
But she will remain, you know, even though she's gone, I think all the stuff she starred in, she's always going to remain on our screen.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, gosh,
Absolutely, yeah.
Kevin, in the Times, I'm fascinated by this. Ratcliffe-on-Soar, which is a power station I know worked near Nottingham. So I used to drive past it all the time, to and from uni.
Yeah.
It's shutting down.
For the final time, midnight on Monday, it will cease operating, and it's the last coal power station in the UK. I mean, it's a real red letter. I mean, I'm currently watching, or I just finished watching a documentary on Netflix on the coal strike and the miners' strike 40 years ago, and you think then it was all about trying to save jobs and save the communities, and now 40 years on, it's gone completely, no more. And from October the 1st, the UK will become the first major economy in the world to have phased out coal power completely as part of the government's aim by 2030.
Does this put an awful lot of people out of work?
Well, no, not necessarily, because, you know, there aren't that many people work in the coal industry anymore. But, yeah, those that are still at that particular power station, that they have no longer...
So they're closing down the power station, but they're not replacing it?
No, nothing in the pipeline. So, but, yeah, I mean, that's on the government, isn't it? They've got to come up with alternative employment, other industries to try and replace these ones, because, you know, they were the bedrock of the Industrial Revolution.
The huge scandal of the miners, all of the miners' strikes and the coal mines shutting down, is that it's one thing to shut down the coal industry, but they should have replaced it.
Well, that's it, yeah absolutely.
So proper jobs for proper people.
Well, not least because the whole communities were built around, so it was not just people losing their jobs, it was communities were collapsing because of it. So yeah, I mean, you know, Britain was synonymous with coal, and as I say, so many communities across the country, and it's amazing to think that from Monday night it won't actually be a thing anymore.
Stephanie, should we have a look at what you're going to be doing all week? Which is talking about Philip Schofield.
Oh, my favourite person. He's continuing his Woe Is Me campaign. He's done an interview with The Sun where he's saying that he was thrown under the bus by ITV and Holly. Obviously now, next week, he'll be starring in a new 3-part documentary on Channel 5 called Cast Away. And so we're going to be hearing Phil's side of the story. I think, you know, he's been relatively quiet over the 16 months he's been in TV exile, but now we're going to really find out what's happened between him and Holly. He says he will never work for ITV again because potentially people were thinking that he was going to star on I'm a Celebrity, but I feel like he's probably turned it down. So this is now Phil's chance to speak out and say what's really been going on.
Have you seen any of it?
I've seen clips of it, and it seems like he's on this kind of redemptive crusade to say I've had time to reflect where my life has gone wrong and what I want to make amends with. But I think producers have kind of read the room wrong because I don't think viewers at home are feeling quite sympathetic to Philip Schofield. I think that lots of people have just turned off him, to be honest.
It's interesting, though, because a lot of it is, at the beginning at least, seems to be filmed with his family.
Yes.
Which is, I mean, I think...
He has a farewell barbecue with them.
Yeah, to be honest...
They deserve medals.
I was going to say that because his wife is impressive because she still stands by him, and I think most women would just want nothing to do with him. And he still wears his wedding ring, and she's... It's almost like they're still married and they're still a family, but each of their own.
Yeah, I think that's all a bit...
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I read in one of the other papers, read an interview and his daughter's quoted in it saying how difficult it was for their mother. I mean, obviously, it's been really a real shock. But yeah, we'll see how.
Does he have a film crew with him?
So he's had
self-filming.
Most of it is self-filming, but I think there's 1 or 2 camera operators there. But it's totally limited. It's totally rough and rugged.
Yeah.
And is it like a survival type thing?
Yeah,
He
hasn't got any food. He has to use all his survival instincts for food, water, everything. So he really is going to be pushed to his limits here. And it's 3 episodes, and it's just Philip Schofield. So it's going to be quite intense viewing.
I think it'll do quite well in the ratings.
Yeah.
So it'll be Channel 5 will just view it as a success. I just don't understand why there is this need to keep... It's got pots of cash.
Yeah.
Why do you just not quietly to go and exist somewhere?
But I guess he's still relatively...
He's used to being loved and adored, and is clearly going through hell, not being loved and adored.
And he probably didn't expect his TV career to end the way it did when it did.
No.
So it's probably, he feels like the carpet's just been ripped underneath him, and now this is his time to get back on there. And he could have a TV career again.
The one thing I think you have to say is that clearly his family love him.
Yeah, and it's to their great credit, isn't it?
It is credit. Yeah.
And that's what matters.
Right, we've got to leave it there. Thank you both. See you later on.
Thank you.
Here's the weather.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a chilly start out there, but at least it's fine and bright for many of us, following all the wet weather that some central and southern parts saw at the end of the week. There will be more rain later this weekend, but for the time being, much of England and Wales bathed in crisp sunshine, and it stays that way throughout much of the day. There will be some cloud arriving into Wales and the southwest, the odd shower later, but the thicker cloud will be reserved for Scotland and Northern Ireland, with more frequent showers, especially for the northwest of Scotland, more persistent rain at times. Feeling relatively cool everywhere, 11 to 15 Celsius, but bright blue skies and lighter winds in the south will be perfectly pleasant. The same can't be said for northern and northwest Scotland, where the spells of showery rain will turn a bit more persistent by the end of the day. More scattered showers for southwest Scotland, mostly dry for southeast Scotland. Northern Ireland, a bit of cloud around, but otherwise largely dry. And for England and Wales, after all that wet weather, finally a chance to dry up, with most places seeing a dry end to Saturday. Clear spells then for central and southern parts, as well as the east overnight. Under those clear skies and with light winds, once again temperatures will fall away. However, during the second part of the night, the breeze will pick up and the cloud will start to arrive in the southwest, so milder to start Sunday here. Elsewhere, a bright but chilly start once again through the Midlands, eastern England, eastern Scotland as well, low single figures in places. Now, we keep the bright skies in the east and for parts of Scotland throughout Sunday. Some high cloud turning the sunshine hazy, but for Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest, through the morning and early afternoon, it will turn increasingly windy and wet. Risk of 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts in the far southwest and risk of further rain in many places.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We on demand. Good luck. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sports broadcaster Gary Lineker is cut his pay for Match of the Day. So he's in talks with the Beeb over a multi-year deal for Match of the Day after volunteering to take a pay cut.
Yeah, so he's volunteering £350,000 to knock off his salary. So he'll just be taking home a comfortable $1 million. So, you know, maybe he'll need some clothes donations as well. But you can't really argue with that, can you? I'm sure that money will be spent better elsewhere.
It's still a massive salary, isn't it?
It is still a massive salary. I think the thing with things like this is that I don't know how much of appeal, and, you know, I'm not the biggest football fan in the world, but, you know, how much of an appeal does Gary Lineker have? And when you think of the BBC, where it's not really out to make profit, I really feel like jobs like that should go to young upstarts, young presenters, getting in new talent, rather than paying the old talent £1 million.
Yeah, I reckon, Esther, if you ask Match of the Day viewers, do you tune in to see Gary Lineker or do you tune in to watch the football highlights? They tune in to watch the football highlights.
They tune in to watch the football highlights and fall asleep on the sofa.
Yeah.
They don't care about Gary Lineker and all of his cronies and all of his mates. He gets the same people in again and again. Look, I think, talking about optics, because we're talking about optics today, aren't we, about the clothes and everything. Gary Lineker, the optics, what a hero. That's what he's doing. He's making himself look good by giving back in his way. I mean, absolutely, we want new talent. I would much rather have more voices and different people on Match of the Day. I watch it occasionally with my family. I wouldn't tune in myself that much.
I can never stay.
But they have the same people all the time.
Yeah. To be fair, the plot twist here is that Jermaine Jenas, was that his name?
Last time we were here.
Was kind of like set to take over, or that was the rumour, but now obviously that's not going to happen. So it might have been that Gary was out the door and they've actually said, oh, actually stay a bit longer.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good morning. Today, the Churchillian plot to secure a vaccine.
Boris Johnson has revealed he planned to invade the Netherlands in a bid to procure those supplies for the UK.
Well, it's just one of the many new revelations from the former Prime Minister, serialised in today's papers.
Israel has launched a series of strikes on the Lebanese capital of Beirut in a dramatic escalation of tensions between the two sides.
The King leads tributes to national treasure Dame Maggie Smith following her death yesterday at the age of 89. Fans across all generations remembering her talent. We're going to be joined by Christopher Biggins as he pays his own tribute to the legend.
As the number of women accusing Mohammed Al Fayed of abuse rises, GB News has spoken exclusively to one of them as she details his behaviour to her.
And his name's in tatters now, isn't it? He's not remembered as the owner of Harrods. He's now remembered as a rapist and a sexual predator. And that's what he deserves in my eyes.
It's a packed weekend of Premier League action with Manchester City boss Pep Guardiola saying he's ready for war against Arsenal counterpart and former protégé Mikel Arteta. And in cricket, England are on the verge of completing a stunning ODI turnaround against Australia.
After all the recent very wet weather, finally a drier spell to come this weekend. But how long will it last? I'll have the full details in the forecast coming up soon.
It has just gone 8 o'clock. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is GB News Breakfast.
Loads of you getting in touch about Maggie Smith. Nigel says, it's because lots of stuff I've not heard of. It's funny, there's so much stuff out there that she's done. Her
Well,
back
we had to be
catalogue.
reminded about her part in Sister Act.
Sister, I'd forgotten about that. But Nigel says, I don't think of Harry Potter when I think of Maggie Smith. I think of Keeping Mum with Maggie Smith, Patrick Swayze, Kristen Scott Thomas, Rowan Atkinson. A hilarious film.
That's a good cast.
Wow. And Tim says, what a true legend. Pure, clever timing with dry wit humour.
What's the film I saw in? Is it something exotic? Marigold?
Oh, yes. She was in that, yeah.
About 10 years ago, maybe?
Brilliant.
Yeah,
film.
that's a good
brilliant
film.
movie.
Yeah. But there's just loads of stuff. She just sort of covered every sort of genre, didn't she?
And,
did it well.
generation. I mean, well, she had such a long career that you'll remember her for something, won't you, that means something to you.
Yeah. Doesn't sound like she had many breaks either. She worked continuously.
Yeah. But, I mean, the other great thing about her is that if she's in it, you know it's good. And there aren't many people you can say that about.
No,
My mum
true.
used to say that about Betty Davis, the Hollywood star. If it's a Betty Davis movie, it's going to be good. And I think you could probably say the same about Maggie Smith, couldn't you?
It's a good point.
Was she in a bad movie? I doubt it. I
doubt it.
So
Anyway,
she knew how to pick her films as well. Because some big Hollywood stars don't know how to do that, do they?
No, you do see some
They
big
make
names in some awful films.
Yes.
But no, it's worked well for her throughout her very long career, and it's nice that she's remembered with a smile.
Yeah, and real affection,
Yeah.
which is lovely.
Anyway, so we're talking to Biggins later about that, so that should be interesting.
OK, how about this now? This is a Boris Johnson quote. I considered invading Holland. That's one of the latest revelations from extracts of his new memoir. It's particularly in the Daily Mail, although even the Telegraph have made it their lead story today.
Yes, he claims he asked senior armed forces members to devise a plan to liberate 5 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine.
And that's because he believed that the doses had been kidnapped, which you could argue they effectively had, actually, by the European Union and then stored in a warehouse somewhere in the Netherlands.
Let's talk to political commentator Piers Pottinger. I don't know whether to laugh, cry or cheer, Piers.
No, exactly. I mean, I think if you ever doubted his sanity, this shows, I mean, he was bonkers. It's a crazy idea. It never was going to work. And the thing that shocks me is that he had serious meetings about it with the army, heads of the army. It's extraordinary. Having said that, it was at a very difficult time, something that this country had never experienced before, in modern times anyway. And, of course, the EU were being very difficult about the vaccines. And President Macron famously, falsely declared that the AstraZeneca virus didn't work for over 65s. And there was a lot of anti-British stuff going on during COVID. So I mean, in mitigation, that's all one can say. But, I mean, the title of his memoirs, Unleashed, makes it sound like this is going to be a really fascinating book. Sad to say, if this is the best that can come out of it, I mean, the other stuff he's writing about is really very trivial. I mean, we learn that Dylan, his dog, also got COVID, and dogs apparently did get COVID, which I didn't know about. But, I mean, I was looking for more statesman-like revelations, something about his real, a bit more profundity. But this is very much flim-flam and very disappointing work, in my opinion. And I suspect he's saving up for a much more meaty memoir later on in years to come, because there's nothing in this of real substance. It's all sort of gossipy stuff. It doesn't really hit the spot. And I mean, the only person he seems to really go for, and that's not surprising, is Sue Gray. And of course, Sue Gray's investigation into him is what finished him. And then she quickly transferred to become Chief of Staff for Keir Starmer, which is fairly odd, to say the very least. And I think he's right to be bitter about her. But other than that, this is a set of memoirs. I mean, this story will run for a short time and then people will forget about it. And I'm afraid to say, I don't think these memoirs, they're not really memoirs, it's a sort of diary. I don't think it's going to do that well, because if these are the highlights from the serialisation, I'm sorry, Boris, I think you've been a bit lazy here.
Very interesting, though. Obviously, the reason I was sort of looking for stuff was that I wanted to know what his version of Partygate was. And actually, he glossed in the serialisation, at least. He does sort of gloss over it, rather.
He does.
But he does say, I saw no cake, I ate no blooming cake.
Yeah.
If this was a party, it was the feeblest event in the history of human festivity.
Yeah, well, you see, that kind of sums up the book. I mean, as you say, I was hoping for a bit more detail. He is very careful not to mention other people involved in Partygate, as it was called, and he glosses over it. And he glosses over many aspects of his downfall when I think people were expecting him to reveal what happened, but he didn't. I mean, it's actually quite dignified in that sense, in that he's not scoring points against a lot of people. One wonders, is that because he's planning a comeback? You never know. I mean,
But he does say that he relied quite heavily on Sue Gray to sort of because there were. I mean, obviously he was a busy man at the time. He had lots of stuff to do, and when these things came up, he sort of relied on Sue Gray to deal with it, and then was quite shocked to learn that she had already been, when she was advising him on things, she had already been approached by the Labour Party.
Absolutely. Initially to be Chief of Staff for Ed Miliband, and then, of course, it became Starmer. Yes, I mean, that is shocking. And in my view, it is shocking, and it does smell of duplicitness. And I think Sue Gray is one of the things the Labour Party is a problem for the Labour Party, as we know. She's a very divisive person, and there seems to be a lot of infighting, pro and against her, pro and con, both sides of the story. And her past is very murky as well. I mean, she ran a pub in Northern Ireland on the borders at the height of the Troubles, and there were stories that was she acting for British intelligence? Was she, in fact, as a strong Catholic, maybe connected to the IRA? We don't know. Sue Gray is a woman of great mystery and I say murkiness, and the Labour Party.
We weren't told that when she was
that.
appointed to the committee. To head the committee looking into Boris Johnson's failures.
No.
We were told she was a woman of absolute integrity, impeccable reputation.
Yeah, well, of course, that's what she would like people to believe. But since then, I think things are looking fairly odd. Don't forget, Lord Ali paid £10,000 to her son to stand as an MP, which he now is. And he 10,000 for expenses, but they may recategorise that, of course, into something else.
He's got very deep pockets, Lord Ali. Piers, thanks very much indeed. It's interesting. The whole Boris thing splits you entirely. With those of you who've got in touch this morning, Ken says Boris hugely entertaining as Mayor of London and Prime Minister, but a serial liar and politically inept. There's no me in Boris, but there is a very prominent I. Michael says, I'm surprised that people on GB News this morning are shocked at the idea of invading the Netherlands. Good on Boris. The EU needed a good slap and still do. Alison says, he was going to invade Holland. He's more bonkers than I first thought. What a mad, mad man. Marjorie says, a terrible idea. Not so. I think in the context, the UK would have admired him enormously. How we would have cheered. So, you know, you're split, which is fine.
As ever.
We can agree to disagree.
Yes. Yeah. But it'll sell well, won't it? I think it will.
Oh, of course it will.
I'm afraid I will. I wonder if he will, won't he? He'll actually narrate himself, the audio version.
Oh, yeah, I should think so.
Yeah, and that will be pretty entertaining too.
Anyway, he's going to narrate his own interview, actually, because he's talking to Camilla Tominey next Sunday here on GB News.
Yeah, that'll be a corker.
She'll put him through his paces.
She will. OK, the time is 11 minutes past 8. Let's have a look now at some of the other stories coming into the newsroom this morning.
Anne the King leading tributes for Dame Maggie Smith after she passed away yesterday at the age of 89. He praised her warmth and wit. The Prime Minister said she was beloved by so many for her great talent, and people across the world have taken to social media to share their own tributes.
Just Stop Oil have targeted Van Gogh's sunflower paintings again. 3 climate activists targeted the artworks just an hour after 2 other activists were jailed for doing exactly the same thing back in 2022. The National Gallery said the 2 paintings targeted had been removed for examination and have been found to be undamaged.
And barristers representing alleged victims of Mohammed Al-Fayed said there are now 60 survivors with credible evidence of abuse at Fulham Football Club. One of the alleged victims spoke exclusively to Patrick Christys last night.
He had this look in his eyes, and I'll never forget it. It was like a monstrous, I'm going to get what I want from you. You know, I don't care how you feel. And I do think because it was in a public place, so to speak, he would have gone further had he could. I think he was worried somebody might come in, or I might have started screaming or something like that. So he made his exit pretty quickly. And I think he would have definitely raped me if he'd had half the chance, 100%.
The National Gallery, why haven't they put those paintings behind glass already? I know you could say it's giving in to Just Stop Oil to actually protect those paintings more. But why? Why allow that to happen again?
Yeah, I mean, the pictures themselves will be covered in glass, won't they? But there should be a barrier.
There should be, I think.
Barrier.
Yeah. I mean, it's a terrible shame, but there should be.
You can't get that close to the Mona Lisa.
No, you can't. She's very well protected.
And these plonkers with their cans of tomato soup.
Yeah.
I mean, it's absolutely crackers.
Outrageous, isn't it?
I mean, and considering 2 other people had just been jailed for doing the same
Well,
thing.
that's why they did it, isn't it? To prove that they're still at the forefront of protest. But nobody has any sympathy with them, surely, anymore. That's a terrible thing to do.
Isn't it just? I don't know.
Come on, National
Crazy.
Gallery, you should have protected those paintings better.
Well, what's happened to... Oh, and there's an older lady as well. I mean, this is the thing, it's...
It's a lot of posh people.
Yes, probably. They're probably all very posh. Well, there you go. Right. Oh, there we go. Oh, there she is in the middle.
Yeah.
Just Stop Oil. I quite like the stag do. Do you remember that stag? Was it last year? There was this guy's stag do, and they took him to the Grand Prix, and they made him wear a Just Stop Oil T-shirt at the Grand Prix.
Oh, OK.
And apparently...
that is not the place to do it.
No, but it was great, though.
Yeah, yes, I'll bet.
That's a great little gag, that one. Let's talk about the weather, because flooding from storms causing disruption to rail services across England and Wales, the closure of the M5 in both directions in Gloucestershire as well.
Yeah, and apparently it's not going to stop there, as the Met Office has issued a yellow weather warning for strong winds tomorrow across the southwest.
And all this comes as, over stateside, Hurricane Helene has killed at least 43 people in the southeast of the US, flooding there and a tremendous amount of destruction that's been caused.
So what's going on? Here's weather journalist Nathan Rao. It's a big question, what's going on?
I know. It's happening all over the place. I mean, certainly in the UK, first of all, the big story this week has been the flooding with some intense downpours of rain this week. Very, very, very heavy rainfall in a short amount of time that saturated the ground. The main problem with the rainfall through the week has been in central, southeastern and southern England. And some parts of the country have had more than 2.5 times the monthly average rainfall. Places like Berkshire and Oxfordshire and Cambridgeshire, leaving quite a lot of problems and quite a lot of clean-up, with problems to transport and to people's homes and properties. There is a brief respite in the weather today. It's going to feel a bit colder because we've got a bit of a northerly. But then again tomorrow, there is another Met Office warning, this time for wind down the west coast of the country. That's Western Wales and the West Country, for gusts of up to 60 miles per hour on the coast, up to 50 miles per hour inland. And then, as we go into midweek, a bit of a calm again. And then at the end of the week, we're back into the wet and windy. So we're going into a very, very stormy period of weather.
Well, this is storm season, isn't it? So if it's been this wet at the beginning of it, It
Is it
paints a
going to
grim
go on?
picture, doesn't it?
It does. Storm season, I mean, the Met Office have just released their names. They release names of storms every year in September. They've just done that. The official start to the astronomical autumn is the 21st of September. So we're in autumn and we're at the beginning of the storm season. But yes, Stephen, as you say, we're at the beginning of the storm season and we're starting to report now on disruptive flooding. Looking back over the years, particularly 2014, the winter flooding, which was quite severe, that was at the end of the storm season. We were talking about Christmas flooding. We've got a few more months to go of potentially wet and windy weather. The pattern so far has been looking like it's going to be wet, Atlantic-driven, western, jet stream pulled into the UK low-pressure system type weather. That's what we're seeing. So if we get that through the next few months with the rainfall that we've already had and the water tables are going to be as full as they already are, we could be looking at some problems.
Yes, I mean, in fact, you were talking about the 2.5 times the monthly average of rainfall happening in one day.
Yeah.
2 or 3 days after that, that's when it hits the rivers.
The rivers, that's right, yes. The rivers have a bit of a lag effect. So where the groundwater tends to get saturated quite quickly, there's a little bit of a lag in terms of how the rivers respond. So if we get continual heavy rainfall, we'll start to hear stories, I would be pretty certain, of rivers starting to overflow. And that can be very, very problematic, as we see quite a lot now in the UK. We see it last year, we've seen it in previous years, but that's when we really start to get problems.
All right, so we've talked wind, we've talked rain. What about temperatures? Because when I went out the house this morning, I think it was 4 degrees.
Yeah, we're in a little bit of a northerly, Stephen.
But that's dropped from... I mean, that seems to have dropped massively.
It has, and the temperatures are about 6 degrees lower than average for the time of year. What we've got at the moment is a little ridge of high pressure. Now, in terms of the wind and the rain, that's good news, because high pressure at this time of year, or any time of year, brings clearer, calmer skies, but it's bringing in a little bit of a northerly, and that's coming down, and that's going to keep coming down over the weekend, and that's what's causing those temperatures to dip. And as we get the westerly come in next week, you'll see the temperatures rise a little bit. And that's really what happens. You're sort of playing a balancing act between the two, where you get the colder stuff from the north, or the wet and windier, usually milder stuff from the west. At the moment, we're in a bit of a cooler period.
Great. And then the poor Americans in Florida have been enduring Hurricane Helene, which is unusually almost savage.
Absolutely. Hurricane Helene was an absolute monster, 460 miles wide. This is an absolute colossal beast that ploughed into Florida. One of the main problems, actually, that they had over there was the storm surge. This thing was so huge, and a low pressure associated with it dragged up the seawater and sent it crashing into the east coast of America. And flooding, inland flooding, has been a big problem. But yes, Hurricane Helene, with wind speeds of up to 140 miles per hour, was a really, really big one, and one of the biggest they've had in that area, really, for the last 10 years.
Wow. Well, at least we haven't got that.
Thank goodness.
Thankful for small mercies. Nathan, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thanks very much indeed.
And if you want to know in detail what's happening where you live, here's Aidan McGivern.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a chilly start out there, but at least it's fine and bright for many of us, following all the wet weather that some central and southern parts saw at the end of the week. There will be more rain later this weekend, but for the time being, much of England and Wales bathed in crisp sunshine, and it stays that way throughout much of the day. There will be some cloud arriving into Wales and the southwest, the odd shower later, but the thicker cloud will be reserved for Scotland and Northern Ireland, with more frequent showers, especially for the northwest of Scotland, more persistent rain at times. Feeling relatively cool everywhere, 11 to 15 Celsius, but bright blue skies and lighter winds in the south will be perfectly pleasant. The same can't be said for northern and northwest Scotland, where the spells of showery rain will turn a bit more persistent by the end of the day. More scattered showers for southwest Scotland, mostly dry for southeast Scotland. Northern Ireland, a bit of cloud around, but otherwise largely dry. And for England and Wales, after all that wet weather, finally a chance to dry up, with most places seeing a dry end to Saturday. Clear spells then for central and southern parts, as well as the east overnight, under those clear skies and with light winds. Once again, temperatures will fall away. However, during the second part of the night, the breeze will pick up and the cloud will start to arrive in the southwest, so milder to start Sunday here. Elsewhere, a bright but chilly start once again through the Midlands, eastern England, eastern Scotland as well, low single figures in places. Now we keep the bright skies in the east and for parts of Scotland throughout Sunday. Some high cloud turning the sunshine hazy, but for Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest, through the morning and early afternoon, it will turn increasingly windy and wet. Risk of 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts in the far southwest and risk of further rain in many places.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Now, do you want £36,000?
Yes, I'll bet you do.
In hard, cold cash.
Yes, and tax-free as well. It's the biggest cash prize of the year so far. It could be yours. Here's how to take part.
There's still watching on demand. Good luck.
Yeah, best of luck to you on that one. Now, still to come, apparently 72% of young Brits want to change their appearance surgically. How risky is that? We're going to talk to a surgeon in a couple of minutes.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The king of breakfast TV is back. That's right, Britain's favourite TV host, Eamonn Holmes, returns to Britain's hottest breakfast programme. Breakfast every day from 6 a.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Please tell me that we're British. In our darkest hour, we can work around this. The beer will still be flowing at Christmas. Tell me, please.
Martin, without using bad language, there's no words to describe that this is another major blow to the hospitality sector. I wake up every day with anxiety thinking, what's going to happen to us now? Oh my God, now the weather's against us. Not only are the government absolutely battering us, then the weather's now hitting us as well.
Kate Stewart, this can only mean one thing. Prices, once again, going through the roof.
And there's nothing we can do. We have on costs. We have to buy from the brewery. We have the VAT. We have then the VAT, what we take. It is an absolute nightmare. To be in the pub game now, Martin, is very, very difficult. And there's no light at the end of the tunnel. Everything just keeps hammering us from every different direction. And obviously, we have to pass that on to the customers, then price increases. There's nothing we can do. We don't want to sell beer at an inflated price. We want it as cheap as possible to get people through them doors. But we have no option. They're going to go up again in the new budget. You know, there's no help for us. What are we supposed to do, Martin, except the only option is to close the doors and say, enough is enough. We can't do this anymore. I absolutely cry my eyes out having to put the prices up because you think, oh, my God, people are just going to turn away and walk. But we can't swallow the costs all the time, Martin. It's impossible for us to do because we will go bankrupt. There has to be, there's inflation getting hammered on us yet again, and we have to pass it on. I feel it when I take my children out for something to eat. You're like, wow, that has just cost a fortune. But what is the answer? The answer is the government needs to look at saving the hospitality sector and stop being so greedy in everything that they take away from us, or there won't be pubs.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, new research has shown that 72% of young Brits are looking to significantly change aspects of their appearance.
But some UK surgeons are concerned, especially, of course, after that woman died recently following a Brazilian butt lift, even though that's like a non-surgical procedure.
Yeah, we're joined now by cosmetic surgeon Alex Karidis. Good morning, Alex. Does it surprise you that it's as high as 72% young people wanting to possibly surgically change the way they look?
Well, I suppose it doesn't surprise me entirely, because I suppose it highlights that everybody, particularly when we're younger, we're on a sort of a journey of discovery. And so we're constantly sort of looking at ourselves, looking at our body, looking at our appearance, questioning it. And, for some people, they feel, perhaps, they'd like to change things. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that everybody sort of eventually goes and has surgery. All it does just reflects what people's thoughts are.
Yes, indeed. But we do know, because we all see actually more and more now people who've had a lot of work done. I wonder where the responsibility lies, because obviously it's one thing for people to want something to be done. It's another thing for a surgeon to agree to do it. Don't surgeons have to be actually a bit more strict in turning some work down?
Indeed, to a certain degree, no surgeon has the role of playing God, of course, and being able to tell people what they can't or can have. But of course, it's our sort of position to add a bit of sort of relativity to the whole equation, and just perhaps explain to them whether or not what the request is, whether it's reasonable or not, and whether, of course, it's surgically feasible. Because from our point of view, what we want to do is we want to have safe outcomes, outcomes where people are pleased with them, outcomes where they're not obvious, and they still retain a natural effect overall.
Most of us would say to a young person, you're young. That's what you should look like when you're young. Maybe when you're older, okay, you want certain things done to try and look a bit more youthful. But when you're young, you've got a young face. I'm thinking particularly of faces, I suppose. And you shouldn't be meddling with it when you're young, should you?
Well, you're right, but what you're highlighting here are two different things. Because as you clearly said, when we get older, we have other issues, aging issues, which come into play and concern a lot of people. However, when you're young and when you're perhaps you're born with the nose that's slightly not particularly aesthetically pleasing, or you lack any breasts at all, or have very, very large breasts out of proportion in your body, these issues can concern individuals, and young individuals. And obviously, particularly when you have your whole life in front, you don't want to be burdened with something that's clearly an issue for you.
But that's a fair point. I mean, there's a sensible argument to be made if you were, let's say, particularly flat-chested or particularly large-chested or whatever, where actually it is interfering with life. I guess the problem is with what a lot of young people may want is almost fashion.
I suppose you're right to a certain degree, and I think maybe things like social media play a role in this. They're all exposed to all sorts of imagery these days. They have access to the cameras all the time. They're constantly looking at themselves in ways they wouldn't look at themselves 20 years ago. So they become much more sensitized to their appearance, and so in certain individuals that could sort of manifest itself as a problem.
Yeah, you almost get. Sorry, I was going to say, you almost get the feeling that a lot of young people want in reality what an app does for them on a photograph. They give themselves ridiculously overemphasised eyes, tiny little button noses, and great pouty lips. They can do that on an app, and it doesn't ruin their lives. But if they try and do it in real life, that could be a huge problem in the future, couldn't it?
Well, it's also a problem for us because we're faced with patients coming to us with all sorts of images they've fixed on their phones or made on their phones to say, well, can I have something like this? And we have to be realistic and down to earth and say, you can forget about that because it's simply not doable. So our role is there to try to sort of put people, give them some perspective on everything.
Does there need to be some realism about what surgery can actually do? And I don't just mean the positive aspects of it, but I sort of, you do see these people even with the who are sort of trying to defy ageing a little bit, and it can end up looking really odd, can't it, when you have someone in their 80s who's got a smooth face and a wrinkled neck and old hands and all that sort of thing. I mean, it's not. It doesn't always look right, does it? Even when it's done well.
Yes, I mean, there can be a mismatch, and sometimes, they can be very obvious, as you say. So, from our perspective, we try to sort of, try to keep everything as natural as we can, as much as is possible, of course, because, as you say, sometimes, there are only so many things you can do to somebody. But I mean, all these issues are psychological for many people, and it's about sort of trying to understand what they're going through, what their thoughts are, and from our perspective, again, we're partially psychologists as well, because we're dealing with these issues all the time, and trying to sort of cut through all that and try to understand where it's all come from, which is one of the reasons why we developed a podcast as well recently, trying to discuss with patients about all these confidence issues and the psychology behind it. And it's quite interesting, because you see how far back it goes a lot of times. It stems back to youthful years.
It's got to be well thought through, all of this sort of thing. Alex, it's really good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed.
My pleasure.
I tell you what draws my attention to it a little bit this morning is Maggie Smith. Because there's a wrinkled woman, if ever you saw one.
Yeah.
And she's, and
But you
we're all
don't look
mourning.
at her and you don't look at her and think wrinkled woman, do you?
No.
You look at her and think, what an amazing woman.
Yeah, well, exactly. She may have looked in the mirror and said, "Oh, I wish I was. I wish I was young again," or whatever. But actually,
we never thought that.
No, and I think you've got to learn to grow old, haven't you? And in a way, I mean, we all do bits. I've had some hair rearranged and all the rest of it.
But
it's different.
I watch a lot of American news, and there are some newsreaders whose faces don't move at all. You're surprised, actually, their lips are moving at all to tell you the news, but the rest of their faces, absolute mask. And you think, that's not a natural look either. Talking of ageless beauty, Brigitte Bardot, happy birthday. Guess how old? Brigitte
Don't
Bardot.
know, 70-something, 80-something?
90.
Today. 90?
She's 90 today, yeah. One of the most beautiful women in the world, she was, wasn't she? Probably still is.
Wow.
There you go.
90. That's something, isn't it? Right, Aidan McGee is going to be here with, I'm going to say nothing about beauty, is going to look at all the sport for you this weekend in just a moment.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
And we've got a treat, not only to have you here, but you've brought loads of exclusives for us this morning.
Well,
your
I had
chat
to.
with Robert Jenrick.
Just for you, Ellie. Yeah, Robert Jenrick, of course, is the front runner to be Tory leader.
He is now, yeah.
Amongst Tory MPs, yeah. And he's been talking to us for my podcast, Chopper's Political Podcast, about immigration, about criminals being released from prison. Also, really importantly,
most importantly, some would say.
Yeah, biscuits. Now,
biscuits.
He was. I should explain to viewers. Robert Jenrick, during the COVID pandemic, had to pull together a hamper of goods for those isolating, and he put in a special biscuit.
Yes.
Here's what he had to say on the podcast.
Before we move on to the future and what your plans are, your biggest achievement in government, what do you reckon it was? I know what it was.
Well, you go first.
Yeah, custard creams.
I thought you were going to say that I saved a penny. It was another one of our campaigns, yeah.
But custard creams, briefly, I mean, you were the community secretary. You had to provide food boxes during the COVID pandemic, and what did you put into those food boxes?
Custard creams, the people's favourite biscuit.
What else is there?
The people's favourite biscuit. Now, across the country...
Yeah,
well,
Aidan.
Coffees are being dropped across the country.
Yeah,
is that really the people's favourite biscuit, Aidan?
Listen, you'll never change my opinion. I like shortbread, but I like it homemade with a sprinkling of sugar. Listen, I'm type 1 diabetic. I had to be quite moderate in terms of my intake, but goodness me.
I mean,
a nice cup of tea.
that's a good one.
It's
That's
about the
a good
shape as
answer.
well. If you show, you know, some more intelligent biscuit companies, they will make shapes of biscuit that fit into the tea. There's nothing worse than when you put it into a narrow cup and it won't
go in,
past
will
the
it? You
line.
can't hit the.
So you like the triangular?
Not really
shortbread?
fingers. Just something a bit elongated that I can turn sideways and dip in like that.
Got you.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello again, 8:37, time for some sport. Here's Aidan. Hello.
Morning again to you both.
Yes. So what do we talk about first?
Take your pick. It's like a selection box.
Well,
What about war?
War, eh?
War, yeah. Look, it's emotive language. I don't like really hearing it in football,
yes.
but we are seeing the development of this rivalry between Pep Guardiola of Manchester City, the guy who's won all these Premier League titles, and his counterparts, his opposite number at Arsenal, Mikel Arteta. They played each other last Sunday. The context is that, I mean, they've known each other 30 years. They played at the Barcelona B team back in the 90s when they were kids. Mikel Arteta spent 4 years as Guardiola's number 2. So it's a sorcerer's apprentice, really. And he's maybe getting a bit too big for his boots in the opinion of Pep Guardiola. Arsenal got the 2-2 draw away from home last Sunday with 10 men. And Arteta was accused of employing the dark arts to get the results. Now, he was clearly annoyed by this, Arteta, because he thinks his team are better than that. But when you've got 10 men at Manchester City and you're really up against it, you've got to do whatever you need to do to get that result. Arteta responded by saying, look, for them to say that, I've been there before, I was there for 4 years, I have all the information. Now, that's a very cryptic message, because what on earth did he mean by that? That's what Guardiola came back and said. Is he referring to something bigger than what happened on the pitch? Is he talking about these 115 charges? Because Guardiola came back and said, we know exactly what happened here too in those 4 years. Maybe it's about the 115 charges. Maybe he has information or something I don't know. Maybe he'll tell me next time we meet. And so it's cooking up. It's developing into a Ferguson versus Wenger rivalry from maybe 20 years ago. Of course, it's never going to be the same as that. But it's a nice antidote in some ways, because we're fed up of seeing players hugging each other in the tunnel before matches, swapping shirts after the games. It's so sanitised now. When we like to see a bit of aggravation, a bit of needle in some of these matches. I think we like to see that in all our sports. We like to see the personalities, don't we, clashing?
That's as long as it's real. I mean, if they're just doing it to stir the pot and make headlines.
No, this is real. They don't need to make headlines. It's big enough as it is. But, I mean, you know, the best rivalries in sport were not manufactured. If you think of McEnroe and Borg, or you think of some of the great skating rivalries we had in the past, or the rivalry between the England cricket team and the Australia cricket team, which is real. I don't think you can manufacture it, really. Not in modern-day sport. But nonetheless, City are in action today against Newcastle, and Arsenal are in action against Leicester at 3 o'clock. And it looks like, for once in a while, for the first time in a little while, we're going to see a title race that might go to the wire, although we are only in September, so I don't want to speak too soon.
Tell me about Mick McCarthy possibly being chatted up for I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Now, I had to ask you a minute ago who Mick McCarthy was.
He'll be gutted.
I do apologise.
He'll be gutted hearing that. He's the former Republic of Ireland manager, and he's managed a hell of a lot of clubs in this country. He's 65 years old. He was the manager when Roy Keane left the Republic of Ireland squad in 2002, stormed out. In fact, there's a film being made about the incident, and Steve Coogan's going to be playing Mick.
Ooh, that's
so I wonder whether the ITV bosses looked at it and thought, you know, this guy's got quite a big profile. In football, he's very well known anyway. And I think it's 24 series now, I think, of I'm a Celebrity.
They cast it now. And usually they always have somebody to do with football.
They tend to do quite well. They tend to do quite well as well.
Yeah.
Harry Redknapp win it?
Yes, I think he did, didn't he?
He did, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, something like that.
Who wouldn't vote for Harry, though, to be fair?
True.
He's the nicest man around.
Yeah, but ITV know what they're doing when they cast it, don't they? They know they are trying to get a certain audience, and obviously there will be an audience for him.
Yeah, without doubt. He's a very kind of avuncular character. He's very quite brash. He's no nonsense, but he's also got an excellent sense of humour, and he's a really decent guy. I sat in front of him many, many times in press conferences. I know him quite well anyway. But I was quite intrigued to see him in there. I mean, I think they haven't released any details about who else is in there yet, and they haven't confirmed that he's in it. And as I say, the date isn't even sorted yet. But 24 series, I didn't realise it'd been going on that long, did you?
Tony Blackburn was in the first, he won the first.
Is that the first
Can't have
one?
been 24 years ago.
Unless they have more than one a year, do they?
No, it's always in the lead up to Christmas, isn't it?
That's what I thought.
Is it?
I think so. Or is it in post-Christmas? I'm mixing
Well, no, I
it
don't know when
strictly.
Nigel was in it. It was in the last season, wasn't he?
Mm.
I've totally lost track.
Yeah, well, this is
totally lost track.
It's definitely Tony Blackburn was the first winner.
Yeah, 24. So anyway, they haven't. It's,
My
it's still up in
goodness.
the air a little bit, but it'd be good to see him in there and you'll enjoy him and you'll get to. If you don't know him now, you certainly will.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's something to look forward to.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Right, we better leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Aidan. We'll see you a little bit later on, won't we?
And do stick with us, because still to come, we'll be looking through the papers with Stephanie Tetchy and Kevin Schofield.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
SpaceX has completed its first private spacewalk. What do you mean you don't know what I'm talking about? Billionaire Jared Isaacman became the first non-professional astronaut to walk in space this morning. It was live on Britain's newsroom. I didn't know what I was watching. Here's his reaction.
There's SpaceX. Back at home, we all have a lot of work to do, but from here, Earth sure looks like a perfect world.
So that was him coming out of his little capsule. He was attached to the capsule by what they call the umbilical, by a cord, and that was obviously the Earth in the background. It does raise the question, though, Tom, doesn't it? Can you justify the expense? We don't know the true figure that cost to get that spacecraft into air and to have this billionaire up there. We don't know, but let's just say it's in the hundreds of millions at least. How do you justify it when we can't get clean water to half the planet?
Just, Bev, to demonstrate that I'm not engaged here in the politics of envy. I mean, this is a private company, SpaceX. Elon Musk is a private individual. He's attracted these fees, if you like, to go up into space. So, absolutely, this is a plutocrat on a joyride in space that's been over the news. I think there's a broader issue here about, instead of joyrides in space, actually we should be solving, as you say, the water challenges, the educational challenges, the malarial challenges in part of this world, and indeed the challenges in our own country with a quadrupling of the number of people that are visiting food banks just in the last 10 years or so. So there are plenty of social problems. If entrepreneurs and billionaires have got money to give away, to throw away, they should be putting them into solving those very human problems on this planet.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 8:45, time to go through the papers with political editor of HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield, showbiz reporter Stephanie Tetchy. Morning, you two. A horrific story in the Mail, Stephanie, about Sean Seashire, this
12-year-old.
12-year-old killers.
Yeah, it's very unsettling and quite disappointing, to be honest. His parents have spoken about their outrage at the fact that his killers, who were 12 at the time when they stabbed him last year in an unprovoked attack, they could be released in 8.5 years, which means they'll be just 20 years old. And the mother of Sean is saying this is not what we should be, that's not the kind of sentence they should be receiving. Because for other young people who are carrying knives and think, OK, I'm going to stab someone, they'll think, oh, I might get 8 years. But the reason why they've got 8 years is because usually the minimum age is 13, and they would get more sentence than that. But because they're 12, they've only got 8.5 years. And I just think there's something needs to be done about this kind of sentence.
I don't know.
I don't know how they're going to be rehabilitated by the time they're 20. As we saw with James Bulger's killers, when one of them came out, he got sent back to prison straight away.
And has been trouble ever since.
And life should mean life, no matter what age you are. If you're 12 years old and you can carry a knife to kill someone who hasn't done anything to you, and you think to expect to enjoy your freedom when you're 20 years old, I don't know what's going to change there. You've taken someone's life.
Because they're children. Because they're children.
How can a child kill?
Yeah, but
with so brutally.
A 16-inch,
seriously.
A 16-inch bladed knife.
It's horrific, but you've got to. You either have to have a thing where you say, because as a child, and it's almost doubling their lifespan.
Yeah.
And half of it is in prison.
Yeah.
So do you say, well, we're going to try and to rehabilitate them somehow. We're trying to try to get them back into society at some point, or you throw away the key.
I think
it's got to be one or the other. If you put them in prison for 20 years, well, they're going to be damaged beyond belief when they get out because all they will have known is prison.
I mean, I can absolutely understand the anger and hurt of the victim's family, not least because it was completely unprovoked.
Yeah.
I mean, just
it's
absolutely devastating that it could happen to anyone. You think, though, 8 years does feel very short.
Yeah.
And I get what you're saying about under 13, therefore, their children. Surely there's some sort of happy medium.
That's
not throwing away the key. I agree with you there. I wouldn't throw away the key at that age. But, there must be some way of, or as you see, you keep them in until they are rehabilitated.
Yeah.
Whether that takes 10 years, 20 years, until...
I mean, that's not a bad... If that's your goal, that's
if they can be, and if you can, but I just think, on the face of it, 8 years for savagely taking someone's life, it just doesn't feel
And
right.
I just think young people now are not going to take the prison system serious anymore. We're seeing people who've been released early. We're now seeing for killing someone, if you are of a particular age, you can get out in 8 years. We're not really, I think, as a society, cracking down on young people who are committing crime and making examples of them.
It's always very difficult, though, when it's people of that age.
Yeah.
And how good are we at rehabilitation?
I don't think
I'm not sure we are. Because if you take somebody who's only 12, you think how damaged that child must be to be able to do it.
In the first place. Yeah.
So, I mean...
Is that who they are as people? Is it their upbringing?
Are they savable? I don't know.
They went to play video games after they killed this guy.
It's the callous nature of it, isn't it?
I can't understand how a child could do it.
But do you then write them off? I mean, this is the issue. Do you then just write them off as individuals when they're just 12 years old?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
No, you've got to imagine, if you get them at that age, there is obviously a much greater chance of being able to rehabilitate them and reintroduce them to society and make them contribute positively to society.
Is that what's going to happen to them?
But, well, that's...
They're just going to be put in some horrible, children's prison or whatever they call them nowadays, and are they going to get the rehabilitation
by its very nature,
they need?
Because of what they did, because it was so horrific, you would think they would need to be extensive, intense.
You need to get someone like Steve Chalk, who we have on quite a lot, and he runs a lot of sort of youth prisons and things, all this sort of, I can't think what his organisation's called, but they do. He would know what to do with people like that. And how you even begin to rehabilitate and what they need. He'd be a great person to talk to about that.
Yeah, and then a lot of people will be saying, you spend a fortune on them, spend a fortune on them.
Yeah, spend our taxpayers' money.
I don't know what
you
do. We don't know what the answer is, do we?
No.
It's just so awful.
They're such rare...
you
just don't know. There is no identity.
I don't think it's going to be rare anymore, because I think now seeing the surge in knife crime, there's every time you see who's been arrested, a 16-year-old boy, a 14-year-old boy.
They get younger and younger,
that is the trend now.
Kevin, can we talk winter fuel allowance in the Express?
Yeah, well, the Express I've got this campaign going on. They're not giving up, even though the government are sticking to their guns. I think they make a reasonable point here. Now, there's been stories over the last couple of days. We've got the budget coming up at the end of October, and Rachel Reeves is looking to do a bit of financial
Jiggery pokery.
Jiggery pokery, that's the phrase. That's the technical term, I think, to unlock an extra £50 billion, changing the way that the fiscal rules, borrowing, etc. So campaigners are saying, well, hang on a minute, you've got this extra cash. Why can't you afford to put $1 billion or $1.5 billion of it towards reinstating the
Yes, it's like she can
payment?
find the cash for something she wants to do.
Yeah, I mean...
That's got to be capital expenditure.
The government obviously, it's capital, it's investment, it's not for day-to-day spending. Again, we've heard of the £22 billion black hole and all that, and that's why they say they've had to do this with the winter fuel. But to your ordinary man or woman in the street, it does look like the Chancellor is coming into a bit of money, a bit of a windfall.
Yeah.
And also politically, I know that speaking to Labour MPs, they're so frustrated that this has just dominated basically the first 3 months of the Labour government.
But politically, if there was a U-turn on it, doesn't that look weak as well?
Well, you're right, it does. What they shouldn't have done, they shouldn't be starting from here. That's the problem. They shouldn't have made the decision in the first place. I think that's what no one can understand, as to who thought that this would fly. It's one thing means testing it. People agree that multi-millionaire pensioners shouldn't be getting it, but it's the fact that they've made the threshold so low. I think that's where they've gone wrong.
Yeah. Oh, we're down to about a minute and a half, Stephanie. So should we do some age-splaining?
Yes, there's mansplaining where, a man will try to teach a woman to do something.
A man actually tries
to Stop mansplaining me, Stephen. But now apparently over 70s are feeling that they're being age-plaining by younger people who are correcting them how to say certain things, what kind of the correct ways to say a thing. And I think that's quite bad, actually. I respect elders. I'm like, if they want to say a certain thing, say it that way, not in the young, trendy way.
I wonder why you're saying that today.
Why?
Oh, anyone over 70?
It's my mum's birthday today.
Happy birthday, Mum.
Happy birthday, sweetie.
We love your mum.
I know,
Fabulous.
she's a gem.
So you've got to be very careful what you say to her now that she's hit this.
I know.
Yeah,
that special age.
Just
let her
slowly.
be. Just let her be.
Don't speak slowly.
Yes, but it just get frustrated, is it, on like the old Zoom?
Yeah.
When everything was on Zoom, and they're like, "Oh, how do I get the camera on?" It's all that sort of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, you speak a bit
everybody
louder.
does that. That's not an age thing. I mean, the Zoom thing during lockdown showed that so many people need an awful lot of explaining. I know you caught onto it, but you like your
but the
gadgets
problem is
and
what
techie
I have noticed now is there are things I'm doing now that I've criticised my parents for in the past. And
you do become your parents.
Yeah, you
no
do.
doubt about it.
You do.
100%.
But I think the 70-year-olds are quite trendy these
young
days.
now, it's
They're
young.
so trendy. Like,
they are.
70's the new 50 now.
Completely. Absolutely, it's the new 50.
Yeah.
50's the new 21.
Is that right?
Hey, I'm very glad to hear that.
Yes, it is. Thanks both very much indeed.
Guys.
Here's your weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a chilly start out there, but at least it's fine and bright for many of us, following all the wet weather that some central and southern parts saw at the end of the week. There will be more rain later this weekend, but for the time being, much of England and Wales bathed in crisp sunshine, and it stays that way throughout much of the day. There will be some cloud arriving into Wales and the southwest, the odd shower later, but the thicker cloud will be reserved for Scotland and Northern Ireland, with more frequent showers, especially for the northwest of Scotland, more persistent rain at times. Feeling relatively cool everywhere, 11 to 15 Celsius, but bright blue skies and lighter winds in the south will be perfectly pleasant. The same can't be said for northern and northwest Scotland, where the spells of showery rain will turn a bit more persistent by the end of the day. More scattered showers for southwest Scotland, mostly dry for southeast Scotland. Northern Ireland, a bit of cloud around, but otherwise largely dry. And for England and Wales, after all that wet weather, finally a chance to dry up, with most places seeing a dry end to Saturday. Clear spells then for central and southern parts, as well as the east overnight. Under those clear skies and with light winds, once again temperatures will fall away. However, during the second part of the night, the breeze will pick up and the cloud will start to arrive in the southwest, so milder to start Sunday here. Elsewhere, a bright but chilly start once again through the Midlands, eastern England, eastern Scotland as well, low single figures in places. Now we keep the bright skies in the east and for parts of Scotland throughout Sunday. some high cloud turning the sunshine hazy. But for Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest, through the morning and early afternoon, it will turn increasingly windy and wet. Risk of 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts in the far southwest and risk of further rain in many places.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're joined by Lewis Oakley and Esther Stanhope. And Lewis, let's start with free gear Keir, shall we? It's been the story of the week, and apparently it's led to, well, calamity in the polls.
Yeah, so he has dropped by 26 points in the opinion polls. And, I mean, it's just been sort of going down from day one. He didn't even start that high. But, yeah, this is just bad optics. As we say, like, he hasn't done anything illegal or wrong. Everything was declared. But at the same time, you're telling people they don't get their winter fuel allowance and you're there walking off with your swag bag. It's just not a good look. And even, you know, I was thinking as well, the optics of them trying to clamp down on MPs having second jobs. You know, any of those could turn around and say, well, actually, we have to pay for our own clothes. I just think it's just bad optics that he's had. And, you know, we've got those comparisons of Sunak in the stands. He's just sat amongst the people. And
Prince William goes to Villa games, albeit in the director's box, but it's not an 8k per game seat. And by the way, can I just mention, this isn't just an isolated Labour incident. Since the start of their tenure, they were accused of filling the civil service with previous Labour donors, previous Labour aides, people who worked for Labour Together think tank. The civil service is meant to be politically neutral, and they bypassed a lot of procedures to get people into their positions, not least the Chancellor Rachel Reeves, who parachuted Ian Caulfield, his name was, who donated £5,000 personally to her, and then he ended up in the Treasury with a 175k a year job. Yes, he did resign after it was revealed in the Times, but it does make you wonder, you know, you've spent years having a go at the Tories for this, and you do exactly the same thing.
Yeah, it's full of hypocrisy, and also the whole Sue Gray thing, and they were slagging off the Conservatives for not towing the line, and now they're being hypocrites because now they're taking freebies.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good morning to you. The Churchillian plot to secure vaccines during the height of the COVID pandemic.
Yes, it's Boris Johnson who's revealed that he planned to invade the Netherlands. You heard that right. It was all a bid to try and procure vaccine supplies for the UK.
Well, it's just one of the many new revelations from the former Prime Minister serialised in today's papers.
Israel has launched a series of strikes on the Lebanese capital of Beirut in a dramatic escalation of tensions between the two sides.
The King leads tributes to national treasure Dame Maggie Smith following her death yesterday at the age of 89. Fans from all generations are remembering her talent. We're going to be talking to Christopher Biggins as he pays his own tribute in a couple of minutes.
As the number of women rises who are accusing Mohammed Al Fayed of abuse, GB News has spoken exclusively to one of them as she detailed his behaviour.
And his name's in tatters now, isn't it? He's not remembered as the owner of Harrods. He's now remembered as a rapist and a sexual predator. And that's what he deserves, in my eyes.
A museum in Australia is surrounded by controversy over their women's-only exhibit. We'll be debating whether it's great for feminism or actually sexist.
And we'll be joined by best-selling author and Air Force hero John Nichol to chat about his latest book called The Unknown Warrior.
After all the recent very wet weather, finally a drier spell to come this weekend. But how long will it last? I'll have the full details in the forecast coming up soon.
Just gone 9 o'clock. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Ann Diamond, and this is GB News Breakfast.
What do you reckon to this women's-only exhibit? Feminism or sexism?
Stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, why have a room? Apparently, it's a room in an exhibition hall that they have just said women only. And I thought at first, is it because the things in it are very
women-y?
intimate? Yeah. women-y.
No.
And that as a man, you might not want to go there and consider it as a work of art, but it's not particularly.
No.
It's just that they've gone to the... Maybe it's just to make headlines and get people along.
Maybe.
But they've said women only in this room.
So a man took them to court because he wasn't allowed entry and won. They've appealed, and now it's... So now no more men are allowed in this women's only exhibit.
Do you think it's just a cynical ploy to get headlines, to make headlines? It's an odd thing.
Might be. He said in his court case, he said he felt excluded, and the gallery said, "Oh, that's part of the artwork."
Oh, to be excluded.
You're feeling the artwork.
Yeah. So as a woman, you are included because you can go in, but as a man, you are excluded, and that's part of what the art is saying to you. I bet it's not very interesting when you get inside, anyway.
Maybe not. But I just thought, how can you argue for equality if you exclude people? I don't understand it.
It's a bit rubbish, isn't it, really, the whole thing? But then the art world is so into itself, isn't it?
Oh, just drive you mad.
Well, yeah, the latest Turner... Is it a prize winner?
No, it's an exhibit.
It's an exhibit.
Oh, I may have actually
modern
taken
art.
it out of the paper because it's an old Ford
Escort.
Draped in a massive doily. I mean, literally like a 10-foot doily over the top, and that's
it.
Oh, here you go. There you go. And that is up for the Turner Prize.
Right, that is a Ford Escort covered with a very giant doily. And that... is it saying anything? Does it say it's saying anything?
I don't know. It doesn't actually point that out.
It's saying, I'm a Ford Escort covered in a doily, and somebody thinks that's clever.
I mean, it's...
Now, I know we have to have provocative works of art that get us talking about art, but the unmade bed, you know, and...
Oh, I saw
and
that.
the pickled shark.
Someone took me to see the unmade bed, and it was... I mean, it was just, like, pointless. I mean, what is the point of that? If that was in my house when I was a teenager, my mother would have gone...
Absolutely. And yet they made it a work of art, and now it's very famous because we all talk about it. But I understand the world of art has to be provocative. Well, I don't know why, but they do. But why this room that's... Anyway, we're going to be debating it later on. So we'll get ourselves all up in a lather about it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And if you want to go and see it, it's rather a long way away.
It's in Tasmania. So.
That says it all, does it?
I don't know. No.
Anyway,
Careful.
back to somebody, yes, who says things like that. Boris Johnson. He's in the headlines again. He's all over the front page of the Mail and the Telegraph today. He considered invading Holland. That's one of his latest revelations because he's brought out his new memoir in the Daily Mail.
Yes, he says he asked senior armed forces leaders to devise a plan to liberate 5 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine.
And that's because at the time, if you remember, he believed that the doses had actually been kidnapped by the European Union and then stored in a Dutch warehouse.
Earlier, we spoke to political commentator Piers Pottinger.
Crazy idea. It never was going to work. And the thing that shocks me is that he had serious meetings about it with the army. Having said that, it was at a very difficult time, something that the country had never experienced before, in modern times anyway. And, of course, the EU were being very difficult about the vaccines. And President Macron famously falsely declared that the AstraZeneca virus didn't work for over 65s. And there was a lot of anti-British stuff going on during COVID. So, I mean, in mitigation, that's all one can say. But, I mean, the title of his memoirs, Unleashed, makes it sound like this is going to be a really fascinating book. And he seems to really go for, and that's not surprising, is Sue Gray. And, of course, Sue Gray's investigation into him is what finished him. And then she quickly transferred to become Chief of Staff for Keir Starmer, which is fairly odd, to say the very least. And I think he's right to be bitter about her.
Very interesting, though. Obviously, the reason I was sort of looking for stuff was that I wanted to know what his version of Partygate was. And actually, he got in the serialisation, at least, he does sort of gloss over it rather.
He does.
But he does say, I saw no cake, I ate no blooming cake.
Yeah.
If this was a party, it was the feeblest event in the history of human festivity.
Yeah, well, you see, that kind of sums up the book. I mean, as you say, I was hoping for a bit more detail. He is very careful not to mention other people involved in Partygate, as it was called, and he glosses over it. And he glosses over many aspects of his downfall when I think people were expecting him to reveal what happened, but he didn't. I mean, it's actually quite dignified in that sense, in that he's not scoring points against a lot of people. One wonders, is that because he's planning a comeback?
Well, there you are. That's an interesting question, isn't it? I think Boris is always plotting a comeback, don't you?
I don't know.
I'll bet.
He makes so much money, makes far more money not being in politics.
Yes, but I think he still wants to be Prime Minister again. I really do. I think that's his driving force.
I think the time has gone. But he might.
I don't think he'd accept that. I'm sure Camilla will ask him, because Camilla Tominey is doing a big deal Boris Johnson interview, which you'll be able to watch next Sunday here on GB News. And knowing Camilla, she'll ask the questions that you probably want her to ask. She won't be afraid to. But Boris will bat them back, because he's very good at that sort of thing too.
Oh, yeah, he is. Yeah.
It'll be good stuff.
Nice segue, by the way. Very nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, professional. You could have a
Well,
career in
that's
this, you know.
It's too late.
Now, the King has led tributes for national treasure Dame Maggie Smith after she passed away yesterday. She was the grand age of 89.
In a statement, the King praised her warmth and wit, while the Prime Minister remarked that she was beloved by so many for her great talent.
Well, colleagues and fans from across the world have taken to social media to share their own tributes.
And joining us now, actor Christopher Biggins. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Anne. Good morning,
Hello.
Stephen. Can you
Lovely
imagine?
to see you, but a sad subject, sadly. Dame Maggie Smith, what a character.
I know. Can you imagine what she would have had to say about the art in Tasmania? I mean, what she was the wittiest woman ever. I mean, if you had the privilege to meet her, she was hysterical. And I was trying to think this morning of some of the witticisms, which I'm afraid I couldn't tell you because we'd all be off the air, because they were very, very risque, they were very funny, and they were very true. And she was not only that. I remember seeing her at the Old Vic many, many, many years ago when she was married to Robert Stevens. And she was the most sensational actress. And she maintained that spirit of acting for the whole of her life. And of course, everybody remembers her from Downton Abbey, which she was very cool about. I remember seeing an interview by saying, what do you think of the new series? And she said, I've never watched it. And that was the joy of her. I mean, she was a real actress, a real woman, and very, very, very funny.
We were saying earlier on, and I think it's a really sort of nice line, that she's obviously a huge star, an acting legend, but not a celebrity.
Well, she hated celebrity. I mean, she loathed having... I mean, Neil and I managed to get a picture with her and Dame Judy, and that was quite rare. I mean, she ran away from all that sort of camp publicity, which a lot of people go for. I'm afraid I go for it sometimes. But she was the wit that I think there are so many wonderful lines that she said and she meant, and she really, really made one laugh. And that added to which she was a wonderful actress.
She was indeed, and a lot of people will remember her for her great acting roles. But what the interesting thing is that she had such a long career and did so many good movies and stage appearances that nearly everybody has got a favourite memory of a favourite part. What's yours?
Well, mine has to go back, I think, to the Old Vic days when she did. I was trying to think of the name of the play, but it was set in the reverse of Light and Dark. So the play was set in the dark, and yet we could see what was happening, but it was absolutely hysterical. And she was brilliant in it. And also in those days, early days, her Cleopatra, a wonderful Shakespearean roles. I mean, the dynasty that she had as a family with her husband and now with her son, who is a brilliant actor all over the world. I mean, he's a big film star, is quite remarkable. And she was a joy to meet, a joy to know, and a joy to love. She was very special.
I love the fact that she has crossed so many generations, actually. I mean, a lot of that down to things like Harry Potter, of course, but you know, she is known by people, you know, from 8 to 80, and again, in a modern age, that's remarkable.
It is absolutely remarkable. And for someone who, you know, feigned getting away from all that publicity and the thing that people love now, personality work, she was adamant in not joining that club. You know, she didn't want to be that. She wanted to be a good actress, she wanted to be a good woman, and she succeeded in all of that. And all her friends will be... I mean, I was very sad yesterday when I heard the news. I mean, because she was a one-off. You know, I mean, The Lady in the Van springs to mind, which was an absolutely wonderful play and then made into a television and a film. It was wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, we had to be reminded this morning by somebody else who reminded us that she was in Sister Act, for heaven's sake. Wasn't she? As a nun.
She was. She was very good, too, with Whoopi Goldberg.
That's right.
I mean, the two of them set the screen alight. I mean, it was a wonderful performance. No, she's given us so many performances that it's difficult to pinpoint them. And I was thinking this morning when I got up, and also last night going to bed, she's given us so much. I mean, it's like an encyclopedia of acting from a great, great actress.
Yeah.
I know you were saying you were sad, which I totally understand. I always think with people like this, so what is quite nice is with their passing, actually we can be quite pleased, we can be quite thankful that we've had them and that because there's so much to celebrate.
You're absolutely right, Stephen. I couldn't agree more. But of course, the thing is, the sadness is that we won't hear any more witticisms from her. And that's, you know, as she was getting older, she had those in abundance. And I think age gives you that. Age enables you to be witty and funny in the most wonderful way because of all the experience that you've got as an actress and as a woman. And I think she had all of that and more. And, you know, the relationship she had with Joan Plowright, the late, I'm forgetting the woman, Laurence Olivier's wife,
yes.
You know, and Judi Dench was incredible. They were like three witches, you know, a coven of wonderful actresses who just laughed and enjoyed their life.
That's right, and they all, you know, those actresses. You said you met her with Dame Judi Dench. She really was one of the great dames. It reminds me of if you watch her in Downton Abbey, she didn't just have good one-liners. She could just do it with a look, couldn't she?
Oh yes, those looks were something else. I mean, you know, I think, you know, there's one particular story which I can't tell you, where she was really rude about a fellow actor. And the witticisms of this line was just fantastic. But unfortunately, I can't say because, you know, you'd be off the air, I'd be murdered in a street corner somewhere. No, it wouldn't be fair because the person is still alive. But there, you know, there was a joy in everything she said and went for. It was just, and it wasn't bitchy, but it was quite strong, you know. And I think the person that I'm referring to, when I see you on your own, I'll tell you both who it is.
And, you know, I think it's a perfect moment to end on. The delight of knowing that most of what she said off camera is unrepeatable, I think is pretty fabulous. Biggins, always good to see you.
And you both. Take care. Have a nice day.
Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.
I quite like... I love it when the older generation are a little bit risque.
But that's what's so delightful, isn't it? Yeah. I think when you get to her age, when she was filming Downton Abbey, for instance, you know, and she was in her pomp and, you know, and she had the walking stick and leant on that, and you get to you get to the age where you can say what you really think.
Yeah.
And she delivered it with aplomb. And I think that's wonderful. See, that's the grace of older age, isn't it? Wonderful.
Do it with a twinkle in
It's a
your eye.
privilege of older age. I'm sure
Yes.
there are lots of people watching now who say it's lovely to be older because you really can say things and think things that you wouldn't have dared when you were younger.
Oh, well, she will be missed.
Yeah, she will be missed. But there's so much...
Well, I bet a lot of her movies and things are going mad on Netflix and Prime and all the rest of it, where people can just access them. There'll be plenty of downloads, I should think.
I think we'll have
Quite
to watch Sister Act at home this afternoon.
Yeah, that'd be
Something
good.
Like that. Be a good laugh.
Yeah. Right. It's 17 minutes past 9. Let's have a look at some of the other stories heading into the newsroom.
Well, there's some breaking news in the Middle East now. The Israeli Defense Force have claimed to have killed Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. It follows a series of strikes in Beirut and southern Lebanon last night. A tweet from the IDF reads the following: Hassan Nasrallah will no longer be able to terrorise the world.
At least 43 people have been killed as Hurricane Helene makes her way across the southeastern United States, leaving millions without power. Now a tropical storm, we should say. Emergency crews are racing to rescue people who've been trapped in flooded homes.
And Just Stop Oil have targeted Van Gogh's sunflower paintings again. 3 climate activists targeted the artworks just an hour after 2 other activists were jailed for exactly the same sort of protest back in 2022. The National Gallery said the 2 paintings that had been targeted on Friday had been removed for examination and have been found to be undamaged.
Barristers representing alleged victims of Mohammed Al-Fayed say there are now 60 survivors and they have also credible evidence of abuse at Fulham Football Club. One of the alleged victims has spoken exclusively to GB News on Patrick Christie's show last night.
He had this look in his eyes, and I'll never forget it. It was like a monstrous, I'm going to get what I want from you. You know, I don't care how you feel. And I do think because it was in a public place, so to speak, he would have gone further had he could. I think he was worried somebody might come in or I might have started screaming or something like that. So he made his exit pretty quickly. And I think he would have definitely raped me if he'd had half the chance, 100%.
Right, yeah, it is shocking, and it's building, isn't it? I think it's going to be worse and worse. Right, let's catch up with the weather. You'll want to know a detailed forecast for yourselves. Here's Aidan McGivern.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a chilly start out there, but at least it's fine and bright for many of us following all the wet weather that some central and southern parts saw at the end of the week. There will be more rain later this weekend, but for the time being, much of England and Wales bathed in crisp sunshine, and it stays that way throughout much of the day. There will be some cloud arriving into Wales and the southwest, the odd shower later, but the thicker cloud will be reserved for Scotland and Northern Ireland, with more frequent showers, especially for the northwest of Scotland, more persistent rain at times. Feeling relatively cool everywhere, 11 to 15 Celsius, but bright blue skies and lighter winds in the south will be perfectly pleasant. The same can't be said for northern and northwest Scotland, where the spells of showery rain will turn a bit more persistent by the end of the day. More scattered showers for southwest Scotland, mostly dry for southeast Scotland. Northern Ireland, a bit of cloud around, but otherwise largely dry. And for England and Wales, after all that wet weather, finally a chance to dry up, with most places seeing a dry end to Saturday. Clear spells then for central and southern parts, as well as the east overnight. Under those clear skies and with light winds, once again temperatures will fall away. However, during the second part of the night, the breeze will pick up and the cloud will start to arrive in the southwest, so milder to start Sunday here. Elsewhere, a bright but chilly start once again through the Midlands, eastern England, eastern Scotland as well, low single figures in places. Now we keep the bright skies in the east and for parts of Scotland throughout Sunday. some high cloud, turning the sunshine hazy. But for Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest, through the morning and early afternoon, it will turn increasingly windy and wet. Risk of 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts in the far southwest and risk of further rain in many places.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Horrible weather. What would be better then, sitting at home, in front of the telly, counting cash?
Oh, wouldn't it be great if you
That'd
win?
be nice.
If you win what we're about to give away, £36,000 in tax-free cash. It's the biggest cash prize of the year so far. It could be yours. Here are the details.
And good luck.
Yeah, best of luck to you. Still to come, we're going to be talking to former RAF navigator and now best-selling author John Nichol about his latest book, Unknown Warrior. That's in a couple of minutes.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
Richard, you know, the King will probably fly there, I would imagine, with the Queen. You can guarantee they'll have to make a point about offsetting their carbon just to keep that lot happy. They won't use the walkabout term because they'll have to keep the Aboriginal community happy over there. Obviously, they'll be fine that the Queen's face has now been taken off banknotes over there, replaced, I believe, by a member of the Aboriginal community, naturally. You know, you've got all of these tick boxes that the King and the royal family have to do, instead of just maybe, I don't know, leading, being there, being present. Why do they keep bowing down to this stuff?
Well, firstly, as I say, I mean, if you look at the Commonwealth, there are 56 countries. Now, I think that's an enormously important institution, and we benefit in all sorts of ways, as do the other countries who are members of it. Now, if you don't take account, with times changing, by the way, of course, as they did during Queen Elizabeth's reign, if you don't take account of various sensitivities, especially certain pressure groups, I'm not suggesting that we write off our history as being something that's dreadful. There are ups and downs and pluses and minuses, we all know that. But the point is to be sensitive to other cultures, and that is absolutely pivotal.
What we're seeing in the UK, a lot of these same issues do crop up in Australia, especially with freedom of speech and saying the wrong thing, getting cancelled. I've met with so many people who have personally, like, they've been deplatformed, lost their jobs just for having an opinion, just for potentially saying the wrong thing, and then losing their livelihood as a result. So with Australia, I think particularly this is the trend that we saw from 2020 with the lockdowns, especially in Melbourne, some of the harshest lockdown restrictions in the world. Now, Australia is known as being a country of freedom and liberty. So then I think for many Australians, it was a huge turning point, a big wake-up call.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
It's 9:26, morning to you. Now, over 1 million British Empire soldiers were killed during the First World War.
But with the devastating scale of destruction, many people's bodies were never recovered, leaving many soldiers without a recognised resting place.
Well, to help staunch the tide of national grief in the aftermath of the conflict, the idea of an unknown warrior memorial was created in Westminster Abbey.
But now, using diaries and archives and interviews, the best-selling author and former RAF navigator John Nichol examines the need for a more tangible resting place in his new book, aptly titled The Unknown Warrior, And John joins us now. A very good morning, John. This is one of the most fascinating subjects. Congratulations on the book. How did they even come up with the idea of an unknown warrior in the first place, and how was he chosen?
Well, thanks for having me on. Lovely to see you both again. So in the aftermath of the First World War, there was really a sense of national grief, national tragedy. Can you just imagine 500,000 families who knew nothing about the loss of their loved one? They'd had a telegram to say that they were missing in action, but that was more or less it. And so there was a chap called Reverend David Railton. He'd been padre on the front line. He carried a Bible, not a rifle. But he won the Military Cross, one of the highest awards for valour during the Battle of the Somme. He came up with this idea to bring back one unknown warrior from the battlefields in 1920, so 2 years after the war, in a grand ceremony with a grand parade, and to have that body interred in Westminster Abbey, and many people will have seen the incredible tomb that is near the west door, so that people had a place to go, a place to memorialize their loved one. And for me, one of the things that came out, and that I talk about in the book, and the stage show that I'm heading off around the country in, is the way that people identified with the slab, the tomb, the one man to represent 500,000. And one little boy wrote asking for a ticket to the ceremony, and he said, because the man in that coffin just might be my daddy. And that says a lot about how successful the idea was.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating as you say that, John, because of all the people who went there, they just didn't know. It could have been their loved one beneath that slab. And what is striking in all of this is since it happened, the respect that memorial has been given, not only by the great British public, but actually by the royal family as well.
Yes, absolutely. So there are about 3,300 memorials and tombs and graves within Westminster Abbey. The Tomb of the Unknown Warrior is the only one that nobody ever walks upon. So I've been in there on a number of occasions when the Queen's been there, the late Queen has been there. And if you look, they walk around it. They come in the West Door, the Dean of Westminster greets them, and they walk around it. But they walk 20 yards further down across a memorial stone for Winston Churchill. The unknown warrior is sacrosanct. And that, I think, tells you a lot about the sense of loss and the sense of grief back in 1920 and how important it is today. And it's a magnificent, magnificent memorial, tomb, a way of remembering huge loss. 500,000 with no known grave. Never mind just over the million that were killed. And we're seeing pictures there. When that tomb was unveiled in 1920, there were people that had a lottery for tickets. And there were widows there who'd lost a son, widows who'd lost a husband but no sons. There were 99, a group of people that had won the worst lottery in the world, for want of a better expression. 99 widows who had lost their husband and all of their sons to the First World War. That is terrible.
Yeah, you can't even get your mind around that. I gather that when the Queen Mother got married to Prince Albert, who then became the King, in something like 1923 or something, when she got married there, she was the first royal bride to ever think of it, but she put her bouquet down on the grave of the unknown warrior. And ever since then, royal brides' bouquets have always been then put on that tomb. And she did it because, of course, she lost her brother in the Great War.
So she lost her brother Fergus during the Battle of Loos in the Great War. He was one of the missing. So Fergus was one of the missing, which is why she put her bouquet on there. In actual fact, some years later, I can't remember exactly when, not that long ago, they think they identified Fergus's resting place. So he now, because he was buried unknown, there was bodies buried unknown everywhere, and they think that they found it, and so it is now in a marked location. But her tradition from 1923 has went on, and so almost every single royal bride, whether they got married in Westminster Abbey or not, put their bouquet or sent their bouquet back. And Queen Camilla did it after her coronation last year with the king. So the tradition, it means so much to the country. And, you know, when I embarked on my little journey to tell the story, going back to the battlefields and trying to bring the story to life when I take it around the country, I didn't know that much about it. And I was just amazed. The way a man could become lost in battle were horrific, really, really terrible. And it goes some way to explaining why 500,000 men have no known resting place, and they're commemorated on the great memorials. On the Battle of the Somme. Sorry, Stephen, sorry.
No, well, I was just going to say, John, I mean, that's what makes this so fascinating, in that we all know about the tomb of the unknown warrior. We just, in this day and age, don't necessarily know that much about it. You keep saying you're going on this tour. I mean, you're literally going up and down the country to talk about this. Because I guess this is going to be a subject which is going to be absolutely fascinating to so many people.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the theatre tour company said, look, we think this is such an interesting subject. We think people would like to come to the theatre. And so I go off next week, rehearsals next week. I'm going to be like Biggins. I'm going to be treading the boards on the stage. Not as good as Biggins, obviously. That'd be terrible. Yeah, so we're recreating the story of the First World War. It's not just me reading out loud. We're recreating it. I've just seen the staging being built. So we've got music, we've got lights, we've got recreations of some of the battles, recreations of the last letters. You know, many of the personal accounts in the book are from people who are writing letters to their loved ones, and they died. Yeah. And so they are the last letters ever written. And so the story is so moving, Stephen. I mean, you know that I've written quite a few books before. It's my 19th book, but it's the one that has moved me the most. It's a subject I knew nothing about, and it's been such an incredible journey.
I mean, you cannot imagine losing a loved one, let alone your husband and your sons, but losing a loved one, knowing that they died in war, but not knowing how or where they are now. There is a story, isn't there, about you were saying earlier how the body was chosen, because obviously there were many unknown warriors. And I gather that the person who had to choose them, several coffins were brought before him, and he had to choose one. How did he do it?
Well, so this is Brigadier General Louis Wise. So he was in charge in northern France in 1920, and he'd been told to select the remains, which is, you know, what they were then. So his men were in charge of recovering the bodies. And we think about that, 1920, recovering the bodies. They were recovering 1,000 bodies a month from the fields in France and Belgium. 1,000 a month. And they've been burying them since the beginning of the war. And so he sent 4 of his teams out to 4 of the great battlefields to recover somebody that had been buried unknown. And it was the remains. And those 4 remains were brought back to his headquarters in St. Paul in northern France. And the remains were on 4 stretchers covered by 4 Union Jacks. And on midnight, so the 9th of November, 1920, he went into the chapel and he selected one. He simply says in his little memoir, he selected one, and that was the chosen one. And it was the chosen one. What a curious terminology. That was the man chosen to be the one to represent the 500,000. Nothing is known about him. Nothing is known about where he came from, what he looked like. It was the remains of somebody who'd been buried unknown. And those remains were eventually placed in a beautiful oak coffin and then carried with astonishing ceremony through the streets of Boulogne to the harbour, across the English Channel to Dover, and then hundreds of thousands of people on the night of the 10th of November 1920, so the day before the Second Armistice Day, lined the train tracks as this train carrying this coffin in a carriage made its way to London and arrived in Victoria Station. The crowds there, women were weeping on platform 8. Thousands of people were there to greet a coffin of an unknown man. Why? Because he could be theirs. They'd waved them off. They'd waved them off at Victoria Station to go to war, and they were welcoming one home.
It is a remarkable story, John.
Incredibly moving, isn't it?
Really great to talk to you. I'm sure those theatres are going to be packed to the gunnels, I should imagine, because it's just fascinating. Really good to see you. Thanks very much indeed.
Great to chat to you both, thanks.
Thank you.
It's such a key piece of our history that a lot of us have not forgotten about, but just have never been taught about the detail of it in that way.
But what a good idea it was in the first place.
Phenomenal.
And so beautifully carried out. I mean, I gather the coffin that his remains were put in was made from wood from the trees in Hampton Court Palace. You know, they even thought of that, and that coffin had a huge state funeral and has been marked and revered ever since. I think that's fantastic.
It's incredible.
Because that shows how important it was for young men to go, and now young women as well, going off to war.
Right. Good to talk to John this morning, and we're going to be back with more on the situation in the Middle East for you in a couple of minutes.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Sleep Report 2024 is based on a comprehensive survey conducted all across the country, and the report found that over half the population, get this, falls short of the recommended 7+ hours of required sleep each night. And shockingly, 1 in 4 of us is getting 5 hours or less, and that includes you, doesn't it?
Yes, I'm very bad at sleep. 4 or 5, I'd say.
That's
A bit
awful.
like Maggie Thatcher. What would you get on average?
I'd say at least 6. 7 probably average.
That's probably not good. I think you probably need 8. Well, almost half of Brits rate their sleep quality as 5 out of 10 or lower.
Dr. Manesh Shah and Dr. Sita Shah joins us now to tell us all about the sleep and how Brits are struggling. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
First question is to you both. How many hours do you both get?
God, I think it varies. I try and hit that 7 hours of sleep.
Why are Brits so bad at getting sleep, especially in terms of hours? 4 or 5 hours for me, 6 hours for you. It's the same for everybody out there in the UK. We're just not going to bed early enough. Is it as simple as that? Or is it slightly more complicated?
Yeah, so I think the key is to establish a good routine. So waking up at the same time every day, making sure that you're going to sleep at the same time every day, and being quite sort of rigid and strict with yourself when it comes to those timings.
And also, it's not just the length of, I get, say, 7 hours, it's the quality, isn't it? You've got different phases of sleep.
Yeah.
Just explain those. Is it, as far as I remember, REM, deep sleep? Just tell us about that.
Correct, yeah. So, essentially, there's 4 stages to sleep. So there's stage 1 and stage 2, which are your lighter stages of sleep. Then stage 3 is your deeper sleep. And then you've got the stage 4, which is your REM. Which is a rapid eye movement stage. And it's the stage 3 and the REM sleep which is really, really important for restorative and regenerative sleep.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The king of breakfast TV is back. That's right, Britain's favourite TV host, Eamonn Holmes, returns to Britain's hottest breakfast programme. Breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
At 9:41, just want to update you on the breaking news from the Middle East. And the Israeli Defense Force claims to have killed the Hezbollah leader, Hassan Nasrallah. It follows Israel's targeting of Beirut overnight, a series of attacks claiming to have struck the central headquarters of Hezbollah. Israel claims that Nasrallah was the intended target. Initially, there were reports he was fine and survived. However, his death has been confirmed by Israel.
Yes, in fact, a tweet from the IDF reads the following: Hassan Nasrallah will no longer be able to terrorise the world.
Keep you up to date with that as we get more details through, of course.
Now, to what we were talking about a bit earlier, a controversial women's only museum exhibit could soon reopen in Australia, in Tasmania, apparently, after a judge overturned a previous decision that stated it breached anti-discrimination laws.
The exhibit had previously aimed to highlight historic misogyny by banning male visitors from even going in.
Well, the judge ruled that it did not allow for discrimination. As they say, it promotes equal opportunity for a marginalised group.
Oh, well. Should it all be going on or not? Let's talk to relationship expert Belinda Love and journalist Anne-Marie Scanlon. Belinda, let's start with you because you're in Australia, aren't you? What do you make of this?
Yes.
Is it feminism or sexism?
Well, I think that we're trying to combat misogyny with misandry. I think that by eliminating or eradicating the opportunity for men to come into this, we're actually perpetuating the problem and we're not creating equality.
Then, very briefly, what's in there? Because, I mean, is it something that would outrage men if they went in or disgust men? Or is it just nothing when you get in there?
I haven't been there myself, but I think that, well, actually, yes, it might encourage men to want to be there. I think it looks fantastic. But I think we need to actually promote equality by allowing men. Why wouldn't we want women to be celebrated by men by showing off our talents?
Yeah, all right, Anne-Marie Scanlon, what do you think? I mean, how can it be right if we're trying to push an equality agenda if you don't have equal access to see something?
Well, the first thing I'd say to Belinda is she's a relationship expert. So does she think that women have the right to consent, to say no? Women have the right to their own spaces, and it's not equality. And the thing in Australia that's hilarious is if that gentleman had rocked up to that room and said, actually, I'm a woman, they'd have let him in.
It does seem, I mean, I'm having trouble getting my head around this. It does seem a bit weird, doesn't it, Belinda, to deliberately provoke. And maybe that's what the art world is up to at the moment anyway. Is that what it's about, just being deliberately provocative?
I do believe that the pendulum has swung too far in the process of wanting to create feminism, because feminism is actually about equality. So I think if we're eliminating the opportunity for men to include themselves, we're just perpetuating the problem. I do believe we do have a right to consent of what we do and what we don't want. But if we're thinking long-term goals and our long-term vision of equality, is that helping or hindering the process?
I mean, I have to say, Anne-Marie, it makes me want to set up my own interactive art installation for men only and call it, I don't know, a pub.
Well, you know, that's a good example, Stephen, because for a long time women weren't allowed into pubs, or if they were, they had to go into the snug. They couldn't drink at the bar. And it's within my lifetime that that's become a reality. But if you did set up a men's only organisation, I could walk in and say, I'm a man.
Yeah, but that's...
Give me a point.
All right, but that's a... I mean, I get the point
that's
you're saying.
That's complicating it even more.
It's a different argument, really. But how could it... As you say, it's not that long ago that women had to stay in the snug in a pub, and you would argue against that. So how can you argue for an exhibition that one sex is excluded from?
I'm quite happy because I think in this day and age, women's only spaces are on the wane. It's very hard for women to have their own spaces. And to be perfectly serious, we had that case in Edinburgh where the CEO of a rape crisis centre was a man. He had a trans identity, but he's legally and physically a man. And that's where this leads. Feminism is about equality for women. Egalitarianism is about equality for all, and egalitarianism is for men and women. But feminism is for women, it's for females.
So I can't, hearing you say that, both ladies, I can't understand why this gallery, this art exhibition, should be even making a point about this. It seems a bit crazy, doesn't it?
I don't think it's crazy at all.
Yes.
I think women are entitled to have a space where they can just be women without the male gaze, without men coming in and saying, I'm going to tell you all about the history of that picture, because men tend to take over.
Oh.
That's mansplaining again, isn't it? We were talking about that a bit earlier.
I mean, heck, Anne-Marie, if I said something equivalent about a woman, I'd be in trouble.
Of course you would, Stephen, because traditionally women have had to listen to men, and we're only decades out from women actually getting their own voice in society. It's, you know, within our grandparents' lifetime that women were actually able to stand up and say, I have an opinion, I have a vote, I'm going to do this.
All right, so Belinda, is Anne-Marie right that in a way you can, as women, you can do to men what we've been criticised for doing to women?
Yeah, I don't agree. I think the whole reason why feminism occurred is for equality of the sexes, because of things like we weren't allowed to attend pubs, the gender pay gap, all of those certain things. And now we're just perpetuating it by excluding them. How is this solving the inequality problem?
I don't think it's solving anything. It just seems to be raising more questions, but fascinating stuff. But it's rather a long way for us to go and have a look for ourselves.
It's for us.
Yeah.
Belinda, Anne, thanks very much indeed.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Strictly starts tomorrow. There's been a bit of controversy around this year's show. What are your thoughts on that? You've been defending Giovanni. What's your thoughts on all of this year's show and the build-up to it?
Oh, I think it will be as wonderful as it's always been. You know, it's an uplifting show, isn't it? It's got the glamour, everything. There's nothing to make you sad in it. And, you know, I had the most amazing time. And Giovanni was my partner. And it's still, you know, a life-changing experience. And at that time in my life as well, it was a year after Paul, my late husband, had died. You know, it was a tough, tough time. And it just totally brought me out of all my grief. And everyone on the programme is just so lovely. It's like a big family. And my experience of Giovanni, I know other people have said they've had a different experience, but mine was he really looked after me in my grief.
I remember, Debbie, at the time you spoke so movingly about how dance was like therapy for you. It helped to bring your Shazam back. It got you back on track. But could I ask you at all about the investigation that's being carried out in Giovanni? Do you think that can be properly conducted? And have you been approached to give any evidence in that?
I think it will. I'm sure that, you know, they will do it very thoroughly. And the fact that it's taken quite a long time, you know, is that they're really going into it to make sure they make the right decision at the end of it. And I think lots of people will be invited to give their experience of Strictly. So I just hope at the end of the day, you know, I don't want anyone to be bullied. You know, I'm really against all of that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Hooray!
9:51. Saturday Morning Live is up in a couple of minutes, so let's see what's in store for you with Ben Leo and Tatiana Sanchez. Morning, you two.
Very good morning to you. Yeah, of course, we're going to be getting stuck into Boris Johnson and all the serialisation of his new book, but more importantly, really, I don't know, interesting story this morning. The mother of murdered teenager Brianna Ghey has said that she is now very good friends and working closely with the mother of her killer. So tragedy seems to have brought them together. I guess they're still both grieving, but I just thought it was a very interesting, heartwarming human interest story. Some viewers suggesting it's questionable. Others saying that it's very, shows great courage and bravery. But
difficult one, isn't it?
It is
Yeah,
difficult.
it is very difficult.
Yeah, you were saying this morning, weren't you, Anne, that it could be that bond that...
Well, they're obviously bound together by that terrible tragedy. For the two women to be friends, if that's what their feeling is, who would be, you can't
criticise
judge, can you?
Yeah.
But my feeling is that's, I don't know whether it's that healthy for either of them. They've got such different... I don't know. You can't judge, can
No,
you?
we're not in that position, are we? So
It makes
what
me
can you
slightly
do?
uncomfortable for them, but maybe that's something they have to go through.
And we're getting a bit boozy as well.
Oh, well, I
Getting
thought you
boozy
might.
today, yeah.
What's your excuse?
Well, we have a Prosecco man coming in. He's got his own Prosecco brand called the Emissary. And apparently, you can only call Prosecco if it's made in 2 Italian regions. So
Oh, really?
Feel those to you.
So he's not allowed to call it Prosecco?
Well, one can't. But I think in Britain, we kind of say we're having a glass of Prosecco and it's really just a
Could
sparkling
be
wine.
anything.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
It's
a bit like champagne.
Yes. It's got to be made in Epernay.
Even the champagne companies like Bollinger and things, if they've got a vineyard in Britain and they're producing champagne grapes, their own, and their own label, they still can't call it champagne.
Sparkling wine, they call it?
Yeah. If it's produced in Britain, they can't... grown in Britain, they can't call it champagne.
So are you getting a sample in?
We hope.
I should hope so. If he doesn't come in with a sample, I'm going to send him packing.
Yeah.
Well, we'll go out and recce it for you.
Well, yeah, we'll do a quick check
And we'll do
for you.
taste. Have a little taste of it.
Lovely stuff. Thank you very much indeed, both. We shall see you a little bit later
Yeah.
on. Well, in fact, just a few minutes.
That's right. And we will be back tomorrow, will we not?
Yes, we will. With the latest, it's going to be interesting to see, of course, if there's any more revelations in the Mail on Sunday from Boris
Because
Johnson.
officially, isn't tomorrow the first day of the Tory party conference?
Oh, yes, it is. So that'll
There's
keep
something to
us
look
busy.
forward to.
My chair's going down, so we better say goodbye. Here's the weather for you.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a chilly start out there, but at least it's fine and bright for many of us, following all the wet weather that some central and southern parts saw at the end of the week. There will be more rain later this weekend, but for the time being, much of England and Wales bathed in crisp sunshine, and it stays that way throughout much of the day. There will be some cloud arriving into Wales and the southwest, the odd shower later, but the thicker cloud will be reserved for Scotland and Northern Ireland, with more frequent showers, especially for the northwest of Scotland, more persistent rain at times. Feeling relatively cool everywhere, 11 to 15 Celsius, but bright blue skies and lighter winds in the south will be perfectly pleasant. The same can't be said for